Enough going to be too much and enough with the exploding rates of autism. Autism rates are rising exponentially, with recent statistics estimating that 1 in 36 kids are now on the autism spectrum, and a much higher even for boys. And just 1 to 2 generations ago at most, it was about 1 in 1500. It's time to take this way more seriously and address the root cause of autism head on, instead of simply continuing to blame genetics and say, we don't know what's going on. If you or someone you know has a child with autism, undoubtedly as a parent, the first question that you'll ask is, why? Specifically, is autism genetic? Still today, this is a long-held assumption that genetics and heritability must explain sharp increases in diagnosis and the wide variation in symptoms across the spectrum. However, we're here to challenge that assumption and propose an empowering new perspective backed by emerging science. While genetics do of course play a role through something called genetic predispositions, even traditional medical doctors and media outlets are now being forced to admit that there is an environmental factor. While they pretty much leave it as that, a general blanket statement regarding the environment, we do the opposite. This video and all of our content will take you deep into the real root causes of known triggers of autism spectrum disorder. We now know that there is a full-on environmental perfect storm brewing for kids struggling with autism, and genetics only play a small role in that whole picture. This video is for parents and caregivers of children anywhere on the autism spectrum, seeking clarity and community and care options that dive deep into the real root cause of autism, rather than merely calling it genetic and hoping to work around the challenges that autism presents. We'll explore evidence on genetic links to autism and why genes alone fail to explain recent rises in autism. Instead, we'll introduce what we call the perfect storm, where accumulated stressors and dysfunction disrupts nervous system function over months and years, altering the trajectory of childhood development. Parents will find drug-free answers to help their child's perfect storm. I'll never forget the first 3-year-old patient with autism I was able to care for. After 3 years of constant struggles with everything from sleep to sensory meltdowns, speech delays, major motor...
Of course, that was with autism. I didn't realize I did not have my mic on. This is David Page. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you so much. I am a little bit behind on everything to do. Hello, Tyler. Hello, Danielle. I'm taking a look at these random videos here, basically, that I've found. These are from this month, and so I'm hoping that this is going to be interesting. This guy is kind of interesting, actually.
Constipation, chronic respiratory infections, and so forth. His parents took him in for a full-day neuropsych evaluation shortly after his 3rd birthday. It was here that they received his autism diagnosis, and also were told there's nothing that you can do to help. His birth had nothing to do with it. His gut issues had nothing to do with it.
Well, that's a kind of a weird thing to say because the gut issues are all autistics have gut issues. Period. All autistics.
Also, we're told there's nothing that you can do to help because birth had nothing to do with it.
Oh, well, that's okay, Danielle. You can relax. We'll allow it this time, but just this one time, okay? Now on Friday, that's going to be number 5 for me, so there's going to be no excuses there because the day it starts with an F. So
diet changes and detoxes won't help. Get used to it and save your money because one day you'll be older and he'll be bigger. And you'll have to put him in a home.
See, now autistic people didn't ask why it begins with an F because they knew. I just randomly threw it out there. You have a good one, Danielle.
Take care of him anymore. The number one question that parents ask: what's causing autism? When parents ask why autism occurs, mainstream medicine often says better recognition, better testing, genetics. They only recently finally started to admit that there's also a mix of environmental factors at play. But then
that would be, they say, about 10%. And what environmental factors means, it doesn't necessarily mean environment like we think of environment, like CFCs or chemicals in the air or things like that. It means we have no idea. So therefore, it must be the environment, if that makes sense. But that's how they come to the conclusion that it's in, quote, environmental factors. We have no freaking clue. Therefore, it must be the environment.
Then offer very little explanation or research behind that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Genetic factors are always at play for various
and this guy's a doctor, I'm pretty sure.
conditions. We've known for nearly 2 decades now that genetics don't explain chronic illness all on their own. There's no single autism gene because over 100 genes regulate risks, but mutations only appear in about 10% of cases. So what environmental factors matter most?
So this is chiropractic, so this is probably a chiropractor.
Things get fascinating, interesting, exciting, and frustrating all at the same time because it's a multifactorial conversation.
Whoa, that was a big word. I've never even heard that one. I haven't even made that one up. That is a multifactorial conversation. I want to use that in a sentence tomorrow, but all cool and everything. I'm going to have to work all day, but good thing I'm autistic because we script anyway, so I'll be able to work it in there somewhere.
Here's what we know about this perfect storm sequence or list of stressors and toxins. Mom's preconception health.
Danielle, okay, no, you were supposed to go away. It's definitely in the dictionary. Like you said that right off the top of your head. I know it's there. I play Scrabble. Oh, oops. Sorry. Love you, Danielle.
Sets the stage for baby's health during pregnancy. Prenatal or maternal stress is a big deal. The brain and nervous system is the only system within our entire body that's not fully developed at birth. And there's a large chunk of neurological development that happens before kids take them.
And for some reason, our brain is connected to our stomach. I don't know how or what the heck that means, but the stomach bone or the brain bone is connected to the stomach bone. Okay? We all have bacteria in our stomachs as autistic people. Now, I have no idea why we have this bacteria in our stomach that neurotypical people don't, but we do. And women have, men have 5 or something like that. And then there's 3 or 4 more that women have than men autistics. But we all have this bacteria. So for the brain bone is connected to the stomach bone. That's why you have to get your protein when you have the ADHD and then take your probiotics. Every day, take your probiotics.
Your first breath. The umbilical cord is the power cord. It's not just for nutrition and waste removal and blood flow. It's the direct connection between mom's brain and nervous system and baby's brain and nervous system. So babies feel...
Wait, you read the dictionary probably front to back 20 times. Danielle, was there a question about you being autistic, Danielle? Was there seriously ever a question? Are you still wondering? No, I've read the dictionary like 20 times because it calms me front to back. I so love you, Danielle. My mom takes probiotics. She gave me one. It helps. I like the Activia. I like just eating yogurt sometimes. Kombucha. So who was that said they tried kombucha for the other day? Was that you, Tyler? But oh boy, is it good. No, it was somebody in my group, I think. Anyway, moving right along. Doesn't this guy look like he should have a kufi on? Tell me, I know this guy's white. I know it's a red beard, but tell me he doesn't look like he should have a kufi on. For a minute, anything, no thanks. It's really good. It works well. He looks like he should have a kufi. I'm not making fun of you. Yeah, I am. I am. Why is it like the autistic guys out there making fun of everybody? I'm going to get in so much trouble. Somebody's going to record me on a live, and I'm going to get in so much trouble.
Fear, the concerns, and the worries that mom.
And my response is going to be, well, Leah, I did say that.
The autonomic nervous system develops during utero. That part of our neurological control that deals with the fight or flight versus the parasympathetic.
Whoa. This is important stuff here.
The stress, the fear, the concerns, and the worries that moms feel. The autonomic nervous system develops during utero. That part of our neurological control that deals with the fight or flight versus the parasympathetic rest and digest sides of our nervous system. And especially within the third trimester, mom's vagal tone, which the vagus nerve is heavily influenced in socialization.
So he's saying that that flight or fight response was there before I was even born. Like I didn't even get to like pop my head out and say hello world before I was like, holy shit, get me the hell out of here. What the hell?
Immune system challenges. Babies will take on mom's vagal tone, or the function of the vagus nerve.
No wonder we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back in. Mom! What the fuck? It's cold out here.
Third trimester. Birth interventions and trauma are a big deal. In a normal, natural, unmedicated vaginal delivery, there's about 60 to 90 pounds of pressure that's being placed onto the head, neck, and rest of the body. When we add interventions at delivery, like Pitocin...
Like, I think only a chiropractor or like an obstetrician would know that.
Reductions, epidurals, forceps, vacuums, or C-section deliveries, that amount of pressure and tension onto baby's head and neck significantly and exponentially increases. And it impacts the most delicate and underprotected area of the entire body. And that's our upper neck. Our brainstem lives there. It's intimately created or connected to our ability to latch and to feed. We already talked about our vagus nerve, and that's exactly where our vagus nerve lives. It's right within the upper neck. And then it goes down to our gut. It goes down to our heart and our lungs and the digestive tract.
It's the vagus nerve. We just got to get rid of that vagus nerve. Yeah, we would totally. That's why in utero, the babies sleep, they jump after a loud sound of external vibration. But it seems to me what he's saying, the placenta is like independent of the mom. And, the mom feeds the placenta and then the placenta filters everything, so to speak, blah, blah, blah. So there is a kind of a degree of separation. But from what he's saying, those hormones from the fight or flight still go to the baby. So maybe the uterus doesn't filter the actual hormones. Maybe that's how it works.
It plays such a significant role.
I was a medic and I actually went to nursing school and all that stuff. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Socialization as well as emotion.
So that's why he's probably talking about environmental factors. Maybe he's talking about external, like psychological factors on the mother and a result of possible chemicals or hormones, whatever, that make it through the placenta, not necessarily outside of the skin environments or factors. Maybe that's what he's getting to.
Early exposure to antibiotics, medications and toxins is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I share with parents when it's necessary in the office is that moms are preemptive
because all those will affect how mom's body works. Period. Any way you look at it, that's what they're designed to do. The problem is a drug affects the entire body. I burnt myself today and I took Tylenol, which was kind of dumb because that Tylenol is affecting 100% of my body for like 0.02% of my body here. They cross into the baby. Yeah, into the baby as well. Right, exactly. So through the placenta and then into the baby. That's what I'm saying with hormones. But there are certain things like toxins and like bad bugs, or what I mean by bacterias and viruses and that kind of stuff doesn't pass through the placenta. I don't believe, or it's not supposed. I don't think so anyway. So there is like a certain protection.
Antibiotics in preparation for cesareans to deliver their baby. All it takes is one round of antibiotics to be able to alter the microbiome or our gut makeup for a life.
Yeah, and I just came up with a deal. Did I read that last night about Tylenol? Yeah, I think we talked about that. They have found the studies have found that that's a crock of woo-hoo. I mean, if that was, then cool, but it's not. You know what I'm saying?
And as we start piecing the puzzle together, we understand that if our gut and our vagus nerve and the stress onto the nervous system is there from before they take their first breath.
Yeah, I just saw that yesterday, and I think it's about a week old or a couple of days old.
It really sets up the stage for chronic infections, chronic ear infections, chronic respiratory challenges, gut and immune system issues, and then leads into the sensory struggles.
Okay, this guy knows what he's talking about because he's starting to get into comorbidities. This guy's a chiropractor. I don't know how he knows what he's talking about, but I think he is really onto something here. I thought he was going to be selling snake oil, but I think this guy's the real deal.
Well, behavioral issues later on. Then on top of all of these things,
now he did say behavioral issues, but he's really has not demonized autistic people or anything, but he was talking about sensory things that can cause behavioral issues later on. That's correct, actually.
I mean, experiences and emerging research are starting to talk about things such as exposure to EMFs.
But it isn't just that they're acting out to act out, and he just acknowledged that and didn't sound like a jerk.
Blue light, Wi-Fi, screen time, that disrupts our sleep and our circadian rhythms, as well as our hormones. Mold and other household toxins or chemicals in our foods, our soaps, detergents, household products, personal care products, and toxins and medications and other medical interventions. So what does the perfect storm do? These events lead to a neurological tipping point for many children.
Really? Really, Danielle? Really?
Where they may be developing normally.
I did not know that. I hadn't heard that before.
Or mostly on track. And then
okay, the reason this really strikes me as interesting is, okay, my ex-wife of 20 years was an occupational therapist. My wife now, she's a massage therapist, but she is probably one of the most certified, among the most certified, like, 1,000, what do you call it, massage therapists in the country. Like, she can go around and teach all kinds of different, things. So I hear a lot of these different things, but we have never talked about that. So she may not even be aware of that. I mean, she is a massage therapist, not a chiropractor, but still, she is very up on, well, all kinds of stuff. She helps with babies and stuff like that, like whatever you call it, masseuse or whatever, if it's needed. Certain massage can help, blah, blah. I don't know. It's real, though. It's not snake oil stuff. It's actual real proven stuff. She does she can charge medically, like through Medicare or whatever.
Once all of this stress and toxicity adds up,
or insurance
backs up, their nervous system gets locked into a sustained, stuck fight or flight pattern of sympathetic dominance. Once the nervous system is shifted,
Are they stretchy by chance, or is there any chance they have Ehlers-Danlos?
and stuck into this pattern, all of the development and general health functions are thrown off track, like our gut and our immune system function, our gross motor and fine motor development.
Yeah, and massage does the same thing. Right. Absolutely. And she even does she does gut massages. I'm not kidding you, but it's not like she just does it. She's been medically trained how to do it, and um, but I'm sure you're aware of that too. How are you so aware of all this stuff? Because you're like on top of that.
Quality,
Oh yeah, she's done that to me. She's saved me.
quality and
I wish her sister had said something to her, and that's what pisses us off about her sister, because her sister died a month ago now, and she lived right here. She was 56, autistic, of course had interception issues. She said that she was having some trouble going poo, but she was pooing a little bit, and that her stomach was hurting a little, but she didn't say anything. And what happened was she got in a lot of pain. We took her to the emergency room, and 3 days later she was dead. Um, and that just happened. She lived with us because we all took care of each other. So, and then that was after my son died in October, and then I guess the would it be matriarch, the father-in-law, who was 78 and 300 some odd pounds, fell and broke his femur. So he's out of the house now too. So the house is empty except for me and the wife and our daughter, or my stepdaughter technically.
Sleep, overall body inflammation, and so much more. Once these challenges start to pile up, the brain and then the nervous system then gets thrown off track and begin to struggle with the core elements of autism, like communication, social interaction, sensory processing, restricted and repetitive behaviors, stimming, and a whole heck of a lot more. If your child has an autism diagnosis and you've been told that there's nothing that you can do to help them heal because it's purely genetic, it's time to learn more about the role that environmentals may have played and how your child really can heal and have a greatly improved quality of life. While mainstream medicine and media are...
Oh, dude. Oh, come on, dude. You dropped the ball. You can't heal us. And if there's been damage through the placenta, that damage is done to our brain. Okay, here it goes. Here it goes. I'm gonna back it up a little bit. All right.
Do to help them heal because it's pure.
I need to back it up more.
Our quality and quantity of sleep, overall body inflammation, and so much more. Once these challenges start to pile up, the brain and then the nervous system then gets thrown off track and begin to struggle with the core elements of autism, like communication, social interaction, sensory processing, restricted and repetitive behaviors, stimming.
Okay, I'm good with all this so far.
If your child has an autism diagnosis and you've been told that there's nothing that you can do to help them heal because it's purely genetic.
Heal?
It's time to learn more about the role that environmentals may have played and how your child really can heal and have a great...
He's talking about heal even knowing that it's a mutation, a normal mutation, a normal brain type, a different brain type. He knows it's structurally different. Yet he's talking about healing it. This guy went from like great to quack in a minute. Well, okay, Danielle. Okay, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Let me hear him out.
Greatly improved quality of life. While mainstream medicine and media are finally admitting that there are environmental factors at play, they never dive deep and tell you what those truly are. To learn more about exactly what environmental triggers and
now, if he had said the word treat, how you can treat autism and help deal with those environmental factors or whatever that could have been a factor in it, you're still treating it. But I don't know that you're really healing it. You can't take a sensitivity away and still have autism, or whatever. And that to me would be healing, like healing my hearing sensitivities or my skin sensitivities. I mean, I could treat it. I could toughen up my skin, go to karate or like okay, the sunlight hurts my skin bad. But when I worked as a trash man and I had a farm, my skin was actually darker, even though I'm Scandinavian. It was darker than my Mexican friends, so I would give them hell about not being real Mexicans because I was darker than they were. But my skin didn't hurt there because I had toughened it up. So to me, that's treatment. So are we talking about the same thing, healing and treatment versus a cure, or are we talking about different things? Some symptoms may be exacerbated by a misalignment of the spine. Absolutely. Absolutely. I could see that. I could see that, definitely. Just in this, like, in the sense that pain itself, I think, exacerbates a lot of ailments. Just because people start getting tired and beat down and have less will to fight or push through. It psychologically, it kind of brings us down a little bit, and I think that impairs our ability to heal. Boy, I'm sounding like a earthy person, aren't I? Yeah, sensitivities,
storm factors
whatever,
that can increase the risk of autism and contribute to its related challenges. Click the link below or the one that's in our bio to read the full article, Is Autism Genetic? And get the answers and the drug-free action steps that you deserve for your family and for your child.
I don't know where he was going there at the end. I didn't like that, where he went at the end there.
How did I know that I was autistic? How did I know that I was autistic? The short answer of that is I absolutely didn't.
This is another one that I pulled up. I'm using my Stream Deck now yeah, it was echoing because I hit the Stream Deck twice. Here, I'll show you the Stream Deck here, what I'm talking about. It's this right here. So there's different buttons here, and I set it up to where I could pull up a video on each button, so I could kind of keep track of what I'm doing a little bit better. Let's see. How do you know if you're autistic? Female signs and traits. Now, there's another one that was pretty interesting.
So what we know about the genetics of autism from twin studies is that
I'm going to go back to the other one later if I have time.
The genetic influences on diagnosed autism are largely overlapping with the genetic influences on subclinical autistic traits. We also know that for
what's meant by subclinical autistic traits?
Most autistic people, the genetics of their autism is just like the genetics of their and our height. It's the product of hundreds and hundreds of common alleles, common genetic variants, which we all share. And some people have more of them and are taller or have more autistic traits. And some people have fewer of them or a different combination of them and are shorter or have fewer autistic traits. It's only in a very small minority of autistic people that a rare mutation that is qualitatively different from what all the rest of us have seems to be playing a large part in their autism. But for most people, genetics of autism, just like the genetics of height.
I don't understand what she's trying to say there.
So what we know about the genetics of autism from twin studies is that the genetic influences on diagnosed autism are largely overlapping with the genetic influences on subclinical autistic traits. We also know that for most autistic people...
Oh, okay. Subclinical autistic traits that you don't diagnose by. Echolalia or something like that.
The genetics of their autism is just like the genetics of their and our.
Well, that would be a clinical. Poor social skills, that would be social interaction, one of the three main criteria. But, and repetitive behaviors would be under that too. And then, what's the other? Social repetitive behaviors, and there's another one. Why am I not coming up with it? Oh, sensitivities. But then it would be like verbally stimming, or echolalia, palalia, alexithymia, dyspraxia. All those different things aren't necessarily clinical in themselves, although they would be considered subclinical as anxiety, aloofness. Girls mask more and do better than boys. You're dang right. You're damn right. And they're way better at handling the anxiety. Well, not handling it. Masking it. Way better at masking it. Boys might act out more, and girls bottle it up, and then you have to be really scared. That's why I'm always more scared of girls than boys.
Our height.
And I'm being a little bit stereotypical there, but there is a difference in how autism does present in women. Poor social skills, then they do more socially. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the product of hundreds and hundreds of common alleles, common genetic variants, which we all share. And some people have more of them and are taller or have more autistic traits, and some people have fewer of them or a different combination.
I agree with the more autistic traits and less autistic traits. We don't talk about that very much, but I absolutely agree with that. And I believe that we also have different types of traits or whatever, too. But no matter what, if we're autistic, period, end of story, done.
Nation of them and are shorter or have fewer autistic traits. It's only in a very small.
And I would say in those subclinical traits, like alexithymia, things like that. Or also, yeah, I would put comorbidities in that same category. I would tack that on to what she's talking here.
Small minority of autistic people, that a rare mutation that is qualitatively different from what all the rest of us have seems to be playing a large part in their autism. But for most people, genetics of autism, just like the genetics of height.
Okay, the traits are there with girls, but less likely seen if they aren't with their safe person. Oh, heck yeah. Oh, yeah. I love.
Hi, I'm Jeremy.
I love when autistic people are not masking or what have you, when they're at home, and it's so amazing. Now take a drink. Let's go on. What was this one? What you need to know about autism with Jeremy Venstra Vanderweel. Oh, that guy can't be German. And look at him. Tell me this guy's not German. Holy jamoly. Okay, we're going to listen to Himmler here.
Maybe Venstra Vanderweel.
I did not say that. I didn't say that. It was a speech thing. I'm autistic is part of my stuttering. I videoed my kids a show, Doctor, because with my daughter. No one, of course, you know what, Danielle? That's a bunch of bull crap, too. And a lot of that probably is because you're female. No, she doesn't know what she's doing. It's just a girl. Ugh. And that's okay. I'm complaining that you had to do that. You're very intelligent, smart. I am so happy you did. But boy, I sure would love to give them a middle finger for that, or a whole handful like that. That's what that is. A whole handful of these.
A child and adolescent psychiatrist who primarily sees people with diagnoses of autism, from 2 or 3 year olds all the way into adulthood. Thus far, most of the risk factors that have been identified have to do with either pregnancy or birth. So being born very prematurely or having
Well, yeah, you are educated in the medical field. I know that for sure.
complications
You got the lingo
around birth. Some risk factors in moms, like diabetes, like being overweight, certain medications or infections during pregnancy, clearly increase the likelihood of a later diagnosis.
I'm not making fun of Hispanic people when I go into that, because I live in a Hispanic neighborhood, so that's what all my neighbors sound like, I'd say. Right?
Diagnosis of autism. Importantly, the data do not point to parenting or other factors after birth that significantly increase likelihood of autism.
It can't. Why don't you say it's impossible for parenting? He could have just said it's impossible, but he didn't say that.
Pregnancy clearly increase the likelihood of a later diagnosis of autism. Importantly, the data do not point to parenting or other factors after birth that significantly increase likelihood of autism.
Like, he's putting doubt in there. We know. Oh my goodness gracious. What is he doing?
Autism. Genetics is now understood to contribute significantly to autism. Some of that data is from twin studies, where you see that identical twins who share 100% of their DNA are much more likely to share a diagnosis of autism.
Okay, you're my people, because, yeah, I got POTS, and I thought I was getting dementia. It was from the brain fog. That's why I'm not working. I can do this as long as I'm sitting down and I have my protein drinks, and look at this. I think you've seen me do my shots here every once in a while.
Autism than fraternal twins who share 50% of their DNA and are much.
And something happened since then with the PTSD or something, but I developmentally, I think I'm thinking the same, but my brain is very delayed and way more than it was. So I am more literally, I want to say the R word here, than I was before. And because I'm just slower. Literally, yeah, but I am just literally slower, as in the way they used to use the R word is what I'm trying to say. That's I was a hospital corpsman. I went in the Navy in 1987.
Much less likely to share a diagnosis, about as likely as any other sibling. So that's useful in understanding.
And this is, I hate it when they talk about twins. Do you know how many types of twins there are? Did they talk about these twin studies? What kind of twins? Literal identical twins, where it's one cell that was fertilized that was split in half? Is it mirror twins? Is it two in vitro fertilizations from two different eggs from two different mothers that aren't the donors and aren't yeah, I'm gonna rewind this whole thing because that got me kind of like, what?
Thus far, most of the risk factors that have been identified have to do with either pregnancy or birth, so being born very prematurely or having complications around birth. Some risk factors in
Now that's very interesting. Both of my kids were preeclampsia. Now, if it, that would cause more of a lack of blood flow, I would think, but who knows?
Moms, like diabetes, like being overweight, certain medications or infections during pregnancy clearly increase the likelihood of a later diagnosis of autism. Importantly, the data do not.
I hope. Okay, I know this is important for moms to know, and as a father, I would be just as concerned. I always am, or even a grandfather. But the thing is, I hope this doesn't scare moms from taking vital, like life-saving things that they should be taking, to save the baby's life, or you know what I'm saying. I hope this doesn't get moms too scared to actually take things that might save their lives or whatever too, But at the same time, I think this is a very interesting thing to bring up, and it's very important to think of, an important factor.
Point to parenting or other factors after birth that significantly increase likelihood of autism.
There isn't anything after birth that could... Okay, I'm going to shut up this time.
Thus far, most of the risk factors that have been identified have to do with either pregnancy or birth. So being born very prematurely or having complications around birth. Some risk factors in moms, like diabetes, like being overweight, certain medications or infections during pregnancy clearly increase the likelihood of a later diagnosis of autism. Importantly, the
bullshit. I have never heard that. I have never seen that. And the thing is, it's DNA, how we're formed, not how we were born. So is he saying that if you were born with a cesarean, it was less traumatic or something for the baby, that they wouldn't be autistic? Are you kidding me? The birth method is going to cause what?
Born very prematurely or having complications around birth.
Everything before birth, everything I'm cool with, but complication around the birth itself is not going to cause the autism. It might complicate. I mean, if we have lack of blood flow or whatever else, maybe it could make it worse. And in that sense.
Risk factors in moms, like diabetes, like being overweight, certain medications or infections during pregnancy clearly increase the likelihood of a later diagnosis of autism.
Right.
Importantly, the data do not point to parenting or other factors after birth that significantly increase likelihood of autism.
Okay, does not. I thought he was saying it was. I was like, what? Okay, so he's right.
Genetics is now understood to contribute significantly to autism. Some of that data is from twin studies, where you see that identical twins who share 100% of their DNA are much more likely to share a diagnosis of autism than fraternal twins who share 50% of their DNA and are much less likely to share a diagnosis. About as likely as any other sibling.
Okay, cool. This is the first time I've actually seen anyone talk about the different types of twins, but there's 8 types of twins or something, and that all makes a big difference. I think even a mirror twin versus a quote regular twin could make a difference, because it's how it's split. What I don't know.
So that's useful in understanding that genetics contributes.
Oh, really?
But now we also have additional data, which is that...
Is that where there were 2 placentas? And that kind of twin?
If you send all the genetic testing we know how to send currently, you have about a 10 to...
Now, were you like a twin that they just didn't know about?
20% chance of finding a genetic variant that explains that identical twins who share 100% of their DNA are much more likely to share a diagnosis of autism than fraternal twins who share 50% of their DNA and are much less likely to share a diagnosis.
Okay, so you probably know as much about twins or more than I do. But am I correct? Isn't there 8 different literal types of twins? And I'm going all the way to the point of you could have a mother that what do you call it? A womb mother, a surrogate with 2 different eggs that have been fertilized with 2 different fathers. So technically, you could have 2 twins and a mother that were completely nobody's related, that kind of thing. But okay, there's 8 different types, and it's amazing to me when you really start looking into how many twins are actually even possible. You could have 3 or 4 technically, you could have 3 or 4 variants if they split off in different ways. I don't know that that's ever happened, but
diagnosis about as likely as any other sibling. So that's useful in understanding that genetics contributes. But now we also have additional data, which is that if you send all the genetic testing we know how to send currently, you have about a 10 to 20% chance of finding a genetic variant that explains not all of somebody's autistic traits, but a large majority of them.
That's the road to a cure right there. And see, it can sound so great because this is a psychiatrist, Columbia Psychiatry, talking about this, and it sounds so good. But I hope they understand the context that I hope that they're not trying to cure autism here. They haven't really said it, and I don't think they will.
People often wonder if autism is different in children and adults. Importantly, the way we define autism spectrum disorder is designed to really span across developmental levels. And that could apply to somebody who is 18 months old and somebody who's 80. And importantly, could be used to describe somebody who's unable to speak, as well as somebody who speaks fluently.
Yeah, see, my doctor, I'm 53 now, and actually it was the Social Security doctor, said, well, there's no evidence to say that when you get any older that your autism is going to get any worse. And I'm like, holy hell, what if you have somebody who has congestive heart failure, pulmonary edema, lung cancer, emphysema, all these, arteriosclerosis, Addison's disease, Parkinson's disease, or they're in their 60s. You could take care of any one of those things and it not be a problem. But when you put all those things together, and then the guy's overweight, maybe diabetic, you put all those things together, that person's not going to get better. And you know this in the field you work in. The same thing is, I think, it applies to autism. First of all, Pickens, the first person who was diagnosed with autism, just passed last year. So we haven't had an older population to observe and know that these were autistic people, so that we could observe and discover how aging works with autism. And I understand they're saying a Dalmatian doesn't get worse Dalmatian. It's a dog. It's always just a Dalmatian. It doesn't get any worse. But the Dalmatian can get hip dysplasia, can get worms, can get heart issues, can get all kinds of other things. So it can get worse because it's a dog. And when you have all those comorbidities, when you put together, particularly after you get older. I hate it when someone says my kid is 8, but developmentally 4. No, it doesn't work that way necessarily. I don't know. No. I don't agree with saying that developmentally this or that. Yeah, if you could say, I would say functionally, maybe functionally 4. Would that be more appropriate? Would you be more comfortable with that? Functionally, but not developmentally, or capably at certain. And I know what they're trying to do, but yes, I understand what you're saying completely. That's why I never worried about my son when he wasn't talking, when he was like 5, 6, and when he wasn't even out of a diaper at like 5, 6. I was like, he'll get to it. And he did. No, he was epileptic, and I knew he was delayed to an extent. I figured it was from the epilepsy, but it wasn't. I was a little ignorant there, I guess.
So that means that there's a very wide range that you see, and obviously that changes as people age. But importantly, it isn't just chronologic age, it's developmental age, people's cognitive abilities, people's ability to communicate.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird that he just said that? Yeah, but look, he just said exactly what we just said.
Autism is different in children and adults. Importantly, the way we define
what you said,
autism spectrum disorder, is designed to really span across developmental levels. And that could apply to somebody who is 18 months old and somebody who's 80. And importantly, could be used to describe somebody who's unable to speak, as well as somebody who speaks fluently. And so that means that there's a very wide range that you see, and obviously that changes as people age. But importantly, it isn't just chronologic age, it's developmental age, people's cognitive abilities, people's ability to communicate.
And that's
I sometimes get the question,
what you're saying.
Happened to the Asperger's diagnosis? And there are a couple of answers to that question. The simplest one is that we haven't been very good at defining where the edges are when we talk about the autism spectrum. So historically, the Asperger's diagnosis was used to describe people who have no trouble with learning, no trouble with speaking, and still clearly have all of the difficulties that you see in people with a diagnosis of autism. In truth, that's not a great description. It's talking about something that's sort of on an edge. And so things changed about 10 years ago to describe autism spectrum disorder as a...
And that was as of DSM 4, when the DSM 5 came out. That's what he's talking about, was 2014, so it was 10 years ago.
Broad diagnosis. And within that, to capture areas that people have particular strengths and difficulties, but to leave out this idea of a separate diagnosis called Asperger's. Autism is diagnosed much more...
Okay, you be the judge on this, Danielle. Okay, you be the judge. Here it comes. We're talking about men versus women.
Autism is diagnosed much more frequently in men than in women, and in boys than in girls. And part of that seems to be that autistic traits are just more common in males than in females. That seems to be true whether or not somebody has a diagnosis or not. But part of it also seems to be about, and part of that seems to be that autistic traits are just more common.
No! No! No, they're not more common. More commonly seen. Thank you. Ugh.
Autism is diagnosed much more frequently in men than in women,
right,
and in boys than in girls. And part of that seems to be that autistic traits are just more common in males than in females. That seems to be true whether or not somebody has a diagnosis or not. But part of it also seems to be about what we're used to seeing. And you can think about that as bias, or you can think about that as history. But we are better at looking for autistic traits in boys. We characteristically expect...
I'm so scared
to see things like interests in trains, as opposed to something that might be seen more commonly in a girl, like interest in particular sets of dolls. And we're more used to thinking of somebody as autistic if they present as male.
As if they present as male. That was a weird thing that he said there, if they present as male. That's interesting.
I think that this is a difficult question because people mean different things when they say grow out of. We do see people who have what is oftentimes described as quote-unquote an optimal outcome in autism spectrum disorder. That usually means somebody who had a diagnosis of autism when they were 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and by the time they're adult may have some autistic traits, but may no longer be impaired by them. And that's a critical part of our application of diagnoses, that we think about whether this is something that's getting
okay. No. Ooh. You're not supposed to have dead air. He thinks he cured people because they learned to mask.
Traits, but may no longer be impaired by them. And that's a critical part.
No, we are impaired by them. We're just covering it up. Genius.
Of our
Heimler
application of diagnoses that we think
Yeah, exactly. We're not impaired because we learned to mask and pretend to act like you.
about whether this is something that's getting in somebody's way. So we don't
Yes,
usually
it's always getting in our way. Always. If you are autistic, it is always getting in your way. You don't get to be unautistic one day or a little bit of the time. You can have times where you can tolerate things better than others. You have times where you can mask better than others. But your autism is never reduced, bucko.
Autism goes away. But what we imagine is that there are plenty of people who have autistic traits who may not be significantly impaired or held back by them.
Not significantly held back. If you said capable, that are still capable of performing whatever task, daily task, whatever, fine. But not that we can just do it easily, like he's kind of trying to say here. He's basically kind of saying that we can be cured when what we're doing is we're learning to mask. And yes, I was capable of managing, but it doesn't mean it was easy. It doesn't mean it got easier. And it doesn't mean I didn't need help. And it doesn't mean that it was excruciatingly painful. So you go chop off your feet there, buddy. Go and try walking around on the stubs and see if you can complete your task. Now, there are people that have been able to walk around on stubs right after they had their legs chopped off, I'm sure. But it doesn't mean that they were functional. No, they were probably trying to get away from something so, they didn't die or whatever. But the thing is it would be extremely painful and difficult to do, but maybe it could be done. But what if you got used to trying to operate like that? To where you could function that way. It wouldn't mean the pain was any less or it was any easier. You just had to do it to save your life. And that's why we function, to save our lives. And I mean literally. If we act like ourselves out in town, people will call the cops and we're likely to be in life, particularly if we're a young black man.
In autism spectrum disorder, that usually means somebody who had a diagnosis of autism when they were 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and by the time they're adult may have some autistic traits, but may no longer be impaired by them. And that's a critical part of our application of diagnosis.
No, we are always impaired by them. Always. We might not learn to cope with them. That doesn't mean it's any easier, though, just because we learn to cope.
Diagnoses that we think about whether this is something that's getting in somebody's way.
Yes, it's always getting in our way, no matter what. We're always autistic. The obstacles are always there. Because we learn to jump does not mean the obstacle is not there. We simply learn to jump, but we learn to jump in a way that you don't recognize it and you don't even see it. Because if you see us jump, you're going to be upset with us. Today, I'm sorry it was painful. Masking and presenting normal to do my job. Oh, yeah, I imagine. I have found with neurodivergent women, cis females, I think there's a connection between hard periods, particularly like where you throw the huge clots and stuff like that, and it being extremely painful and literally making you so sick. I literally see my daughter white. Assigned female at birth or male at birth. It's what you're assigned at birth, is essentially. It's instead of conflating gender. A lot of people will say cis male, cis female to indicate the most prominent body parts when a person is born. So anyway, moving right along.
We don't usually think that autism goes away, but what we imagine is that there are plenty of people who have autistic traits who may not be significantly impaired or held back by them.
that could be true, but now he said not significantly impaired or held back by them. And that's what you would call a level 1 autistic, a lower support needs autistic. Now, every autistic has support needs, period. We all need support, no matter what. So a level 1 support needs minimal or less support. I would say less. I don't like minimal, but with like right now, I'm a level 2 support need. My wife has to help me on many things. Yeah, but it's better than saying high functioning or low functioning or severe autism or Asperger's. So that's basically what that boils down to. And
Like,
I agree with you. I just like saying autistic, but I think there is a necessity, clinically at least. Yeah, and it can change daily, but clinically there is a necessity of being able to say this person has more needs than the other one as far as support. So I think that's the closest that we can get without being ableist. But of course, it seems like every term like special, ends up turning ableist anyway.
Like in many areas of medicine, there are disparities in diagnoses based on race and ethnicity.
Yes.
I think people want to know if that's improving, and there is evidence that the likelihood of an accurate diagnosis is going up in Black or African American children, and seems to be going up also in Latina children. That is not an indication that autism is increasing. It's an indication that people are being appropriately screened and identified who didn't used to be. It's still not as good as it needs to be. And we also know that in addition to racial and ethnic disparities, there are disparities based on income.
For me, it can be daily, but there's things like doing bills that stress me out so much. It sets off the PDA to the point where I'm unable to function. I've got some stuff I've got to fill out for SSDI right now. And I can't do it. The envelopes are sitting there. They've been sitting there for 2 days. So my wife has been house sitting. So I think when she gets home, I'm going to use her. I'm going to use my wife when she gets home, but I'm going to use her as a body double and take that in with her and start going through it. So that way I can do it, because with her there, I will feel like I can ask her questions or she can help me, even whether I may or may not need it. And the other thing is I'm literally incapable. I cannot do it by myself. And it's a stupid brain thing, like an OCD thing. It's like literally like, I mean, if you put a gun to my head, yes, I could probably do it. But other than that, if it's not a true threat.
On area of the country, we need to do better. We need to see universal screening and appropriate assessment as early as possible so that kids can get into services.
Okay. Whatever. That part was cool. Do vaccines cause autisms? No. Who was it that says that that autism causes vaccine? Because a lot of the scientists and so forth that that work in those fields of genetics and viruses and so forth, a lot of those people are autistic. So autism does cause vaccines.
Many people have questioned whether vaccines contribute to autism. It's understandable because babies receive vaccines and toddlers receive vaccines around the same time period when people are seeing initial emergence of autistic traits. Importantly, vaccines do not contribute. In fact, vaccines are one of the ways that we actually understand how to prevent autism. German measles, rubella, is a cause of autism.
See, he knew all about the German needles.
When exposure happens during pregnancy, and vaccines prevent that. So ironically, despite all of the concerns, vaccines are a way that we can prevent autism. Questioned whether vaccines contribute to autism. It's understandable because babies receive vaccines and toddlers receive vaccines around the same time period when people are seeing initial emergence of autistic traits. Importantly, vaccines do not contribute. In fact, vaccines are one of the ways that we actually understand how to prevent autism. German measles, rubella, is a cause of autism when exposure happens during pregnancy, and vaccines prevent that. So ironically, despite all of the concerns, vaccines are a way that we can prevent autism.
Yep. That is correct. What's this one called? What you want? Okay, what's the next one? The surprising...
Hi, I'm
Hello,
Maggie,
and
UMD,
welcome to
functional
Being
and
Well.
holistic
I'm
medicine
Forrest
physician,
Hansen.
and I'm
If
here
you're
to
new
say that the way that we deal with autoimmune disease is a freaking crime.
We need to look deeper. So I think of autism as an autism diagnosis as a starting point because there's so many...
Okay, the surprising causes of autism and why it's on the rise. What's with all these news and stuff like this coming up about the causes of autism and stuff? What do you disagree on, Danielle? Because I think I am all that. Because my mommy told me to alter so much in an infant. Danielle, I don't know about that. I don't know that that's true. I haven't seen any evidence on that. I know as far as autism, it does not cause autism, and that's all I know. As far as them preventing diseases, I know that stuff, but I don't know. I have not researched that stuff at all. So I'm not going to refute you or say that you're wrong. I'm going to admit my ignorance and move along.
There's so much more to understand and learn about a child.
Well, Suzanne, it's so great to see you again and have you on the Doctor's Pharmacy podcast.
Thank you so much. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so you were part of our Broken Brain documentary series where we talked about all this.
I was looking at those speakers today. I have the old Yeti, microphones. These things are $400. Almost that setup that's $1,000 right there. Easy, $1,000, and that doesn't include the equipment you need to hook that up to a computer. Heavy metals, synthetic metals, and minerals poison the brain and body. Vaccine shedding. I've heard a little bit about that, and I don't know the significance of it. I know there are concerns about it, and I know that, like, at this point in time, I think the FDA or whatever, the CDC says it's safe. I don't know. I don't know on that for sure.
From autism to Alzheimer's to depression. And you shared a lot about the work you had been doing at the time. This was years ago on autism and helped to sort of frame a picture of autism. It's very different than we think of in conventional medicine. And then you came to Cleveland Clinic and
is it there now?
Our Center for Functional Medicine and gave a very academic presentation about your findings and discoveries in the field of autism that are really shaking things up. We see an enormous increase in autism. I mean, we went from 1 to 10,000 to now 1 in 36 kids. I don't know. It keeps getting worse every time I look. It was 1 in 69. Now it's 1 in 36. And I don't think it's just better diagnosis.
Okay, I wouldn't.
Something's going on.
I wouldn't characterize it as getting worse. It's getting more and more diagnosed, or more commonly. What this 1 in 36? This is a bad number. This is not right. This is an old number.
You were part of our Broken Brain documentary series.
Okay, let me see how old this thing is. I thought it was fairly recent, or I wouldn't put it up. This is 8 days ago. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I know what he's quoting, and it's from the CDC, but I think it's from years ago.
About all
because now it's like 1 in 36 for it. Just says 1 in 36. I didn't see the breakup for boys versus girls, but I think he's going to quote, or 1 in 39, and I think he's going to quote like 1 in 36 for boys and 186 for girls.
Of broken brains, from autism to Alzheimer's to depression. And you shared a lot about the work you had been doing at the time. This was years ago on autism and helped to sort of frame a picture of autism. It's very different than we think of in conventional medicine. And then you came to Cleveland Clinic and presented at our Center for Functional Medicine and gave a very academic presentation about your findings and discoveries in the field of autism that are really...
Holy hell, Deuce! Would you say something, dude? Come on, man.
Really shaking things up. We see an enormous increase in autism. I mean, we went from 1 to 10,000 to now 1 in 36 kids. I don't know. It keeps...
Okay, he's got 1 in 36.
Getting worse every time I look. It was 1 in 69. Now it's 1 in 36. And I don't think it's just better diagnosis. Something's going on. And
that 1 in 136, I think, is girls.
Been unusual because typically in autism care, neurologists or pediatric pediatric neurologist will simply, diagnose the problem, and then they'll prescribe behavioral therapy. We call it ABA. And it's a form of behavioral therapy for autism. And it can be effective, an important part of the overall treatment plan. But they don't.
Do I have to go into ABA? It is effective brain control. Always be aware. That's what ABA stands for. Always be aware. So he's getting into. He's looking at this from a doctor's perspective. And doctors, unfortunately, they're ignorant. Most doctors are going to be exactly like this guy, and I'm talking about 98%, maybe 95% are going to be exactly like this gentleman right here. I'm not saying anything's wrong with him. I'm saying he is ignorant, and he has no idea how ignorant he is. And here he is, qualified as an expert, spreading even more ignorance. And we see this every single day I do this. Every single day, don't we, Danielle?
They don't really ever think about the other things that are often found in these kids.
Qualified experts that are truly hurting the autistic community with good intentions. What's that word about the road paved to hell is, or the road to hell is paved with good intentions?
Kids, like 95% of them have terrible gut issues. 75%.
Okay, that was okay. He said 95% of us have gut issues. That's probably right. I say all of us do, but who knows? He probably is right there.
Have immune dysregulation, right?
75% of us have immune dysregulation. I would say in one way or another, probably. I never really have thought of having a immune dysregulation as much as just, well, I guess, dysregulation, not an immune deficiency or an immune disease or anything else. But I do believe that autism and our guts or whatever in the immune system somehow are all related. And I know like all systems of the body are related, but I think it needs to be noted in autism in particular.
You may have different nutritional things going on, toxic load, things that really are not looked at. And I'm really curious,
the way the doctor was almost, he was devastated to tell me that I needed, some of you, I guess some people do need salt. That is a cardiologist. You said it like it hurt.
Someone who sort of comes from your pedigree, Harvard Medical School, you're a Rhodes Scholar, University of Oxford Graduate School, as a pediatric neurologist, how did you first come to understand that the traditional paradigm of autism was flawed and you needed to think differently about it?
Well, so much of my current understanding of autism I gained from...
Okay, she's a BCBA, and she's a doctor. But the fact that she's a doctor and has BCBA behind her name is going to tell us that she is an ABA person. So what she's going to say is a lot of bull. And unfortunately, we got a whole hour to listen to this.
I'm working with...
But I'm going to go through
really remarkable researchers at different stages of my career. So when I was on faculty...
Luckily, we're 2 minutes in.
At Columbia University about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I had amazing mentors whose specialty was mitochondrial disease and dysfunction and looking at childhood conditions that related to this. And so very early on, I was exposed to the mitochondrial disturbances that are associated with different neurodevelopmental diagnoses.
You're right, Heroic, and hello. I feel ASD always results in a huge catch-up game of correlation and causation. I think you're absolutely right.
Autism and ADHD and intellectual disability. So
okay, thank you. She separated autism from ADHD from intellectual disability. Like I said, I believe that maybe all of us have some sort of intellectual disability, but it is not the autism. And I think they should be separated and understood separately so they could be treated separately in that respect. I'm not trying to say that that some are smarter or less smart or better or less better. I'm saying that ASD and our intellectual disabilities, which I believe we all have to an extent, need to be understood differently, is all I'm saying. Because I believe that we're all both.
It was through that process of my training and working with amazing clinicians, researchers who specialized in understanding mitochondria, metabolism, immune dysfunction, and brain development.
What the heck is mitochondria?
Then I was able to take that and go even further to then understand how other body systems like the gut and
is that the brain, mitochondria?
The immune system and so forth influence brain development in profound ways.
Yeah, so when you pull on a thread, it's connected to everything else,
That's
right? You have to go down that rabbit hole, and you have to keep going because you keep understanding that there's this intersection of all these different phenomena that are contributing to this brain dysfunction.
Okay,
that's right.
That I think could be fairly described as a metabolic encephalopathy. And in English, that basically means encephalopathy means you're a brain pathology. So it's some type of metabolic disturbance in the brain.
Yes.
I wouldn't call it disturbance. I would say difference.
And when we talk about metabolism, we're talking about basically energy production in the
But I'm really nitpicking.
mitochondria. So mitochondria are the little factories in your cells that take oxygen and food and combust it and turn into energy in the form of ATP. So if you have a brain energy problem, you're going to have a brain function problem.
That's right.
And that can lead to a whole host of things. We've had Christopher Palmer on the podcast, who's a psychiatrist from Harvard. You know him?
I do.
His work, he wrote a book called Brain Energy, where he sort of accidentally
heroic.
discovered that by giving people a ketogenic diet, which optimizes
I'm glad you guys are here to make me look good.
mitochondrial function, he was able to cure schizophrenia, which is an incurable disease. And in the same way, you've kind of discovered...
I'm just going to repeat like what you said so that the viewers on YouTube think I'm really smart.
by working on mitochondria and metabolic health and gut health and immune health and nutritional status, you've been able to help these kids with autism improve and in some cases actually reverse autism. Now, you're... Okay, not reverse autism, but Danielle, let's get back to what this guy's saying here. I think you were touching on this, and I think this could be true, possibly to an extent, as far as like, for example, we have ADHD. So nutritionally, that's why okay, everybody stop and drink, by the way. I'm going to make a cue for this for drinking. Everybody has to drink. Remember your ADHD or your POTS, you got to drink. That's the rules, dang it. But Danielle, I want you to listen to this. I think nutrition, I'm not trying to be like snake oil guy, but I think nutrition can help like with our chemicals in our brains if we're got our proper nutrition, and kind of like antidepressants might work or whatever. Do you Hi Tyler. Do you believe that could be the truth, Danielle? I'm going to play this real quick. In the mitochondria. So mitochondria are the little factories in your cells that take oxygen and food and combust it and turn into energy in the form of ATP. So if you have a brain energy problem, you're going to have a brain function problem.
That's right.
And that can lead to a whole host of things. We've had Christopher Palmer on the podcast, who's a psychiatrist from Harvard. You know him?
I do.
His work, he wrote a book called Brain Energy, where he sort of accidentally discovered that by giving people a ketogenic diet, which optimizes mitochondrial function, he was able to cure schizophrenia, which is an incurable disease. And in the same way, you've kind of discovered by working...
Okay. If he was able to cure the symptoms of having hallucinations, yes, I believe that. 1,000%. Cure schizophrenia, I don't believe. And I do believe, I don't know schizophrenia real well, but I believe there's a lot more to schizophrenia than, quote, just hallucinating. They're on the spectrum. They're on the neurodivergent spectrum, so I'm sure there's more to it. I need to interview some schizophrenics so I learn more about that part of our spectrum, because it is our people.
Working on mitochondria and metabolic health and gut health and immune health and nutritional status, you've been able to help these kids with autism improve and in some cases actually reverse autism. Now,
and one issue with schizophrenia, like my grandmother and my mother were diagnosed with schizophrenia, but of course my mother was autistic. My sister-in-law, now she told me, now she was 56, so she told me she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. We know she was autistic and probably maybe some developmental, I don't know, she was kind of really smart on some things, like she could spell like you wouldn't believe. You probably can too, Danielle. But nonetheless, you spelled schizophrenia.
Again, a neurologist, and I think many of your colleagues would consider it quackery to say that
she was my dictionary.
That you could reverse autism. It's just it's a false hope. You shouldn't be telling patients this. And
okay, I got to hear this again.
There's a metabolic encephalopathy, and in English that basically means encephalopathy means you're a brain pathology. So it's some type of metabolic disturbance in the brain.
Yes.
And when we talk about metabolism, we're talking about basically energy production in the mitochondria. So mitochondria are the little factories in your cells that take oxygen and food and combust it and turn into energy in the form of ATP. So if you have a brain energy problem, you're going to have a brain function problem.
I went way back too far, but
to a whole host of
I'm going to let it roll.
Christopher Palmer on the podcast, who's a psychiatrist from Harvard. You know him?
I do.
His work, he wrote a book called Brain Energy, where he sort of accidentally discovered that by giving people a ketogenic diet, which optimizes mitochondrial function, he was able to cure schizophrenia, which is an incurable disease. And in the same way, you've kind of discovered by working on mitochondria and metabolic health and gut health and immune health and nutritional status, you've been able to help these kids with autism improve and in some cases actually reverse autism. Now, you're again, a highly pedigreed neurologist, and I think many of your colleagues would consider it quackery to say that you could reverse autism. It's just it's a false hope. You shouldn't be telling patients this, and yet that's exactly what you're doing.
And he thinks this is great. Look at that smile. What if they were curing autism? Then they would be making entirely different people. And that would be all over the news because these people would be profoundly different. Because you would be changing how their brain works. It would be like like taking all the guts out of my computer. Let's see. Taking all the guts out of my computer here and putting a Mac guts on the inside. What do you mean, David? No. What are you saying? Am I wrong here somewhere? Looks more hysterical than genuine. Yeah, this is like oh my goodness.
Tell us about.
I don't know. This guy's got scary really quick. Uh-oh. What's coming? I'm so scared. Yes, I am.
How that's going?
Sure.
Like what's that?
Well,
like?
we know that autism is defined by a set of descriptive criteria. So it's not in itself a biological diagnosis or biological cause. And
it's
so
descriptive.
It's descriptive, and so
what
is really just I do.
His work. He wrote a book called Brain Energy.
Oh, what the? Where are they going now?
To say that you could reverse autism. It's just it's a false hope. You shouldn't be telling patients this, and yet that's exactly what you're doing. Can you tell us about how that's going?
Sure.
And like what's that?
Well,
like?
we know
this is fascinating.
Autism is defined by a set of descriptive criteria. So it's not in itself a biological diagnosis or biological cause. And
it's
so
descriptive.
It's descriptive, and so that is really just a starting point. We need to look deeper. So I
wait. She said it wasn't a biological cause. She said it literally was not a biological cause, but then she conflated how it's diagnosed, saying that it's not diagnosed biologically, which it's not. But the cause is biological. Diet, proper absorption of minerals, nutrients can support proper functioning of the brain. Yeah, like eating the old castor oil. Bleh! And particularly for ADHD, I've had several psychiatrists tell me this, that yes, it can make the body function better. And I think you'd probably know way more about that than I do for some reason. But yeah, so I don't think that is snake oil in itself. Proper nutrition, but when we think of proper nutrition, we don't necessarily take into account, I think, their mineral supplements and so forth, and I truly believe in them. And a lot of times there's some of those companies that sell like the liquid minerals and stuff like that, and I truly believe that that's important too. And as long as you're doing it properly, I would say like under the instruction of a doctor or whatever, you're not going to hurt a dang thing. You just don't want to overdo it or get a hold of like somebody on the internet that says, well, give them an extra dose of C or whatever. And I just made that up. I have no idea.
I think of autism as an autism diagnosis is a starting point because
right,
there's so many.
Right, and lessening the symptoms because the body is healthy. And it's just like when we exercise, and literally for autistic people, I believe this is true, that exercise is good for the brain. And I truly believe the more exercise we can get, the healthier our brain works. And that may be blood flow issues for an old fart like me. There are so many variables regarding our artificialized American lives. I try to eat what I call the farm diet, and because of my autistic sensitivities, I don't eat processed foods. Like I don't even like a canned food. I'm talking canned beans. Like if I can get fresh, I really want fresh. And very hard to find the actual causes. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, and the thing is, when we say environmental, like I was saying earlier, when we say 10% environmental factors, that literally means we don't know. It doesn't necessarily mean the environment like CFCs or whatever. It could be cosmic rays, for Christ's sake. But it probably has something to do with something external to the body. But could it be psychological even? And then stressors like that and hormones that are put out or whatever. And I'm not saying that moms are psychologically screwed up or anything else, but even if they appear to be doing perfectly well and they are functioning perfectly well, maybe there's hormones that are being put out due to stressors that they're dealing with fine, but it affects things. Yeah. And it could be, it could be the water. It could be, it could be all of these things and none of these things in it, and different combinations of these things. It wouldn't affect us at all. But with the right combination of these things, it helps tip the scales to where we are more prone to become autistic. And there's nothing, that's whatever. I don't have a problem with that, particularly when we are mitigating symptomology. My problem is when we get into the DNA studies, that eventually it's going to lead to some kind of big issues or problems with eugenics and so forth, because it's going to lead to ethical issues. If a child is going to be born without an arm, is that ethically right to do that, or should you make them be born with both arms? See what I'm saying? If you can make them have 20/20 vision all of their life by changing the DNA, shouldn't you ethically do that? But what if you can make it 20/10 or 20/0 or whatever, then would it be ethically wrong to not give them superior vision when you could? See what I'm saying? So we're going to lead into some huge ethical issues. It's going to be bigger than can I say the word, early termination issues we have? Zoochosis? I don't know that word.
There's so much more to understand.
Right. Exactly. And all of those different factors, they may not one of them, or not even 5 of them put together, but maybe 6 or 8 of them put together all could be the trigger. And it could be different combinations, just like our cellular makeup, just like our DNA, and all those switches and triggers.
About a child, about their unique biology, their unique neurodevelopmental profile, all aspects of their health.
Wait, Danielle, I'm supposed to be giving the compliments. I'm supposed to be the one looking good here, darn it.
See, so we sometimes forget the head is connected to the body.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So as a neurologist, when I first went into my training, I was fascinated by the brain. And I thought nothing's more interesting than how the brain develops in children.
Okay, I think there should be autism doctors, and this is a neurologist, by the way. I think that there should be specific autism doctors, and I think they should be based in neurology, believe it or not. I think autism doctors should be neurologists and then get some psychiatric stuff behind them, but they also should have specialties in comorbidities. So, and there's not a such thing as an autism doctor now, of any sort, even a psychiatrist. But I think that that there should be autism doctors. I think they should start in neurology because I think autism is based in neurology. Now, it may have to do with viral stuff or other things like that. I don't know. Developmental pediatricians have neurology. I did not know that. I've just done so much studying that I'm like, this is neurology. And I've mostly based that on I am narcoleptic, which is neurological. I'm epileptic, or was epileptic, which is neurological. Ehlers-Danlos, which has something bizarrely, there's a weird connection there, but I'm not saying that, then they're not comorbid. I'm ADHD, neurological. Did I leave out narcolepsy? And, I have POTS and stuff like that. Oh, really? I did not know that. See, I have developmental doctor. It's a developmental clinic I go to, and I have a developmental psychiatrist too. Now, they don't specifically study autism because it doesn't exist, but they do specifically study developmental stuff, which autism falls under. And of course, as you know, Danielle, you're smart.
But very quickly you realize that the brain is so profoundly influenced by the rest of the body that as a neurologist, you can't just think about the brain. Yeah. You have to be thinking about every other part of the body and about the child's environments. Their home, their school, their community, what they're encountering out in the world, how they spend their time, their social connections, everything, because all of it influences the brain.
It's so true. I mean, what you're saying is so important. And I just want to highlight a couple of things you said. The first is that the diagnosis is just a starting point. And in medicine, this is so true across every specialty. We're really good at naming diseases and then blaming the name for the problem. I know why you don't have good social skills and have stimming problems and have no speech.
I don't know about blaming the name for the problem. It's just they're very problematic names. But, I love this guy. He has these very unusual smile lines that start up at his eyes and go all the way down his cheeks. And he has very, very pleasant look to him.
Autism. Well, autism isn't the cause of those symptoms.
Exactly.
It's just the name we give to people who share those collection of symptoms. And there may be...
And I think that perma-smile he has is totally natural, which is kind of cool.
Very out of causes. In fact, I don't think there's any such thing as autism. There are autisms.
That's right.
Each kid is unique and different. If you've seen one kid with autism, you've seen one kid with autism.
Yes.
There are similarities and there are commonalities, but you have to really think differently. And I think the other thing you said, I just want to highlight.
I agree with him in saying autism, but I think he's trying to say the spectrum. But if you say autisms, then people are going to start saying severe autism, high functioning, low functioning, and all that stuff. I agree with the idea of what he's saying, but what he is saying, we have to be very careful with that language.
Right, is something really radical. Is that your body affects your brain. We know about the mind-body effect, but what about the body-mind effect?
Yes.
And this is why I wrote my book, Ultra Mind Solution, 15 years ago, basically saying how to fix your brain by fixing your body first, right? And I think your discoveries around mitochondrial health and the gut have really helped you treat patients in a very different way. So you do a comprehensive approach. You have an amazing clinic called Cortica that's a company that is across the country providing services
There's my
in a 360
multivitamin
way to families and children with autism. And in that, it's not just behavioral therapy. It's not just family support. It's just not developing the social framework so these kids can thrive. It's dealing with these biological issues. So I'd love to dive into some of the biology because, most people don't talk about the biology of autism. They talk about the symptoms and that's it. It's kind of naming and blaming.
Yep.
And I always say, that's from my mentor, Sid Baker. He says, we have a problem in medicine. It's a naming and blaming game. We blame the name for the problem. And then we think what is wrong. We know what's wrong with you. But if you know the name of your diagnosis, it doesn't mean you actually know what's wrong with you.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest mistake. Certainly in autism, the biggest mistake is attributing any feature or symptom or characteristic of a child to autism.
I love the word that she used on the characteristic. She's a lot better than I thought she was. I'm kind of surprised.
It doesn't make any sense because autism is just that set of descriptors.
Right.
And so we really, really have to look deeper.
Descriptors.
And we know so much more now about some of these root causes.
And when I first saw the autism diagnosis, now you got to understand, I gave diagnoses when I was trained to give diagnoses in the Navy as a hospital corpsman. And when I saw that diagnosis, what you got to understand is a diagnosis is a description of something. It's a description of a disease, ailment, condition, right? Well, it was a description of me, but not as an ailment like I had a scrape or whatever else. It was a description of my brain and who I am. And so I really like the way she put it that way as descriptors. I got to shut the window here. I'm getting cold.
And as you said too, there's a lot of research trying to understand what we call subtypes or subgroups of autism. But at this point in time, I really think we need to treat every child as their own unique subtype and really seek to learn as much as possible as we can about their biology.
Yeah. So
the one thing that all these doctors that we've seen so far today is not one of them has really spoke of that much about. My dictionary broke. A descriptor of how others perceive you. Modern psychology is narcissistically based. Yes, and the way they do it, like PDA, pathological demand avoidance, and they use that wording that, or ADHD even, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder. They make it sound damning.
In your investigations of this, what are the kinds of things you actually look at when you're assessing a patient?
Hey, Danielle, if I ever do, I would love to probably talk to you sometime about medical stuff maybe in the future in an interview or something on YouTube. So keep that in mind because I'm keeping you in mind for it for sure.
Make the diagnosis. And I think I call it thinking and linking.
Yeah.
I need an encyclopedia.
As opposed to naming and blaming, we have to think and link. In other words, think about why causes. And maybe you could speak to this incredible growth in the epidemic of autism from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 36, maybe getting worse every day.
Yeah.
Some of it may be better diagnostic criteria, better diagnosis, but it doesn't explain the magnitude of that change. So what do you think the causes are, and how do you start to investigate what those are?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it might explain that. I don't know that there's any difference. Now, it could be that we have industrialized, and kind of like what Heroic was saying, and you, Danielle, that we're simply exposed to a lot more chemicals, etc.
And the impact of these causative factors on these little kids' biology who are so sensitive, and what does it do to them?
Yeah. Well, so in just the past 20 years alone, the prevalence of autism has risen 400%.
400%?
400%. And sure, we know part of it is related to changing diagnostic criteria.
Okay, when I went to the VA, thank you so much. When I went to the VA, I told them that people are being diagnosed exponentially. When we see the numbers, most autistics are diagnosed between, 2 and 4 or something like that. But now adults more and more exponentially are being diagnosed. And there was no psychiatrist or counselor for any autistic person in the VA when I started. And I fought them for 2 years. And now they have a specific psychologist that once a month has half a day set aside to do video appointments with autistic people all over the world. And same thing with that counselor. But the thing is what they don't understand, what they don't seem to take into account is as more and more as adults are getting diagnosed exponentially, then those numbers from the Veterans Administration. I was a veteran. I was a hospital corpsman in the Navy. And it was in Aurora. Her name is Dr. Major. It's Aurora, and it's her name is Dr. Major, and she's an in-house. She works at the hospital itself. There is there's a clinic, but it also serves the hospital itself, the in-house hospital. And her name is Dr. Major, and she was on the ball, and I recommended her to be the first psychiatrist, and she is. And right now she's working in our region, but I just did send a veteran because I know she will serve anyone, anywhere. And she can because she's the only one basically qualified in the Veterans Administration. And there's a lot of other things that I was trying to get done with that, but I will be returning to that later.
Greater awareness, but there's a big part of that increase that isn't. You know, it can't be attributed just to greater awareness or changing diagnostic criteria. And we know actually a lot about the different causative contributing factors. So the way I like to explain it to professionals and to caregivers is that there are a set of factors related to genetics. So we know genes matter, but they also aren't the entire story. So there are over 100 different genetic variants that we know can influence brain development in a way that can...
Isn't that weird that all these stories are coming out at the same time? I randomly picked these from the last week, and every single one of these is about genetics. It is really weird.
To autism. It's usually not just
genetic
one.
Susceptibilities.
Genetic susceptibilities is usually a complex interaction of many.
Many genes.
Yes.
Right.
And then on the other side, there are also, non-genetic factors or environmental type factors. And usually it's not just one, it's many. And those interact with genetic factors in complex ways. Yeah. So it's a complex picture. But those non-genetic factors are really interesting because many of them give us insight into autism, biology, and some, in a sense, are modifiable, too. So we know that there are a set of parental health...
It's so bad. It's so bad. I'm sitting here nodding my head, basically judging this doctor with a doctorate degree and criticizing how knowledgeable she is. And she's doing really well.
Factors that are increasingly common over time and are very likely contributing to the rise in autism. Things like parental age, things like maternal health factors, maternal metabolic conditions, maternal autoimmune conditions.
What if it's this? In the 50s and in the 40s and the 30s and so forth, people had children a lot younger than what we're having them now. And also we are willing to have children at a much later age, in our later 20s, 30s, 40s, sometimes even 50s. Whereas when we were hunter-gatherer farming societies, I don't know that we got to that. Yeah, a later parental age. Like, I wonder if the parental age hasn't increased like by 10 years on average. And if that hasn't had a significant difference. If there is an increase in the number of autistic kids, and that is a factor. I wonder if that's... Wow, I sounded intelligent.
We even know there are certain... They fall in the category of toxins. Things.
I got a calendar here. I'll mark that down.
Chemicals, pesticides, a whole range of things that are now really widespread in the environment, and a lot of research has been done showing that they affect brain development and brain health. So how that influences our approach at Cortica is...
Okay, I'm at the top of the hour, but I'm going to keep on going. I didn't want to, but this is very interesting, and I'm going to get through this hopefully within the next half hour.
That we really seek to understand a child's medical history. So we get a lot of information about the pregnancy, the birth, family history, family health conditions. And then we also do a deep dive into the child's own biology by looking at a range of different test results. So these might be done on saliva, on blood, on stool, on urine, all ways, in addition to a very thorough physical and neurological exam, of course.
Yeah.
But these are all ways to try to gain insight into what is happening for that child.
And many of these tests are not things you get when you go to your regular doctor or neurologist.
And it's very good that they need to be mentioning comorbidities, but I think she might get to that.
There are things that are kind of outside of mainstream.
Yeah.
And looking at, toxic load, at urinary organic acids, at nutritional levels, at methylation, and all these genes that are in combination. I've often said that environment is a big factor, but genes load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
So it's this sort of interplay environment across these kids' genetics. And I've seen this, I've seen all these different genetic patterns of low glutathione genes and methylation genes and detoxification genes that are really common in these kids, and they tend to be sort of at risk. And I think, one of the things that really struck me when I started learning about this was the work of Martha Herbert. And I'm sure is another Harvard neurologist who studied autism.
And brain imaging.
Yeah, and she talked about these biopsy studies on kids who accidentally died with autism. And all these kids have massive amounts of neuroinflammation. Their brains are on fire.
That's interesting.
And when your brain is on fire, it's hard for it to function. And Alzheimer's is a brain on fire. Depression, we now know, is a brain on fire, right? Schizophrenia, we now know, is a brain on fire. So what's causing the fire?
Yeah. Well, we actually, prior to...
so we just need to make helmets to cool down our head. We all need brain freeze is what we need.
Establishing Cortica, I was on faculty at Columbia University, and we had an NIH-funded research program using multimodal brain MRI to study autism in children and adults. And one of the research studies that we published showed that there was a pattern of neurochemistry, essentially, that really pointed to both mitochondrial dysfunction and inflammation in the brain. And as a neurologist, when I think about inflammation in the brain, there are kind of, there's sort of a set of maybe more acute or sudden onset fulminant types of brain inflammation. And then there's this other category of more low-grade, chronic, smoldering types of inflammation. And the research is really pointing to autism falling within that second category.
Yeah, it's not encephalitis that you get from a virus like meningitis. It's really a much more slow, insidious kind of inflammation.
And harder to detect.
I've heard that Alzheimer's has now been recategorized as a type of diabetes. I have pre-diabetes, by the way. I'm pre-diabetic, which is another reason why I try to eat protein and stuff. But being that I'm ADHD and autistic, I still don't eat right. I'll be honest with you. I don't. And I don't see a way that I'm going to be doing that unless someone's there to kind of enforce that for me, to eat.
Some of our tests, it may not show up on a routine MRI, for example. Sometimes it does, though. And I certainly have seen that in my practice. So, it's the mitochondrial dysfunction, which is linked to this chronic low-grade inflammation, is influencing the function of the brain in autism. And it's also quite dynamic. So it's not, there's a term used for a very long time in pediatric neurology called static encephalopathy. And that couldn't have been, now we know, couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah,
the brain is not at all static.
No.
It's extremely dynamic and influenced by so many factors. And so we do as much as we can in our practice to try to understand what those factors are for a particular child. And then we can take steps that can really be very impactful, like making changes to... So I think
I'm actually impressed with this lady.
6 categories.
Yeah.
The first, lifestyle changes. So things like making changes to sleep routine, movement. What part exercise plays.
I'm really impressed.
There's now a lot of research in autism showing that exercise improves the core features of autism, so socialization, communication, executive function, anxiety, not to mention endurance, stamina, physical health. So just tremendous benefits to some of those lifestyle changes.
And it's an anti-inflammatory for the brain.
Yes.
And it increases new brain connections.
That's right.
With BDNF.
BDNF.
Right. Brain-derived neurotrophic factors like Miracle-Gro for the brain.
Yes.
So yeah, that's
so
amazing
huge,
exercise.
huge benefits. The second category, changes to the diet. Third, related to that, dietary.
Okay, so statins decrease. Okay. Alzheimer's is the lack of cholesterol in the brain. Oh my word. Are you kidding me? Okay, so so what Danielle's saying is Alzheimer's is the lack of cholesterol in the brain, which keeps the pathways from making connections. Statins decrease cholesterol, which is what they need. Alzheimer's, almost all Alzheimer's patients are given statins. Q and stimming. I'm lost. What do you mean there?
Wait, before you go off the diet, go. don't just like bump right over that.
There's
what
so much
role
to
does
say
nutrition play? Because I want to go slow with these 6 things because I think you've got a lot in there that's really powerful and very unique. So what is the role of nutrition and diet in autism?
Yeah. Well, there's a really very big role. I mean, there's a very big role for nutrition and diet in health for all human beings.
For all of us, yeah.
Yeah. And for, in autism, there's a lot of interest in diet.
See, I believe in like you talked about Eastern medicine, and Eastern medicine is medicine, and it is medicine. And so having a holistic approach, I think, as far as literally like the environment, your vitamins and so forth, and minerals and proper diet, exercise. Literally, I know exercise for sure. When I was a garbage man, I felt like you wouldn't believe. I still had meltdowns. Don't get me wrong. I didn't know about the autism, but now that I'm on a bunch of medications that are helping with the ADHD and with the flight response and the depression, I'm doing much better. So I imagine if I was to be exercising, it would even help. But I'm still... The thing is I've got the POTS now, so I don't know if I could actually... I don't think I'll ever be able to truly exercise again. Not actually exercise.
There always has been.
I'll be able to like keep my range of motion and all that stuff going, but not truly exercise, like run or anything like that. That'd probably be impossible.
But I think some of that interest...
Not just to be healthy, but as a therapeutic tool.
Yes.
Yeah.
The emphasis in the past has been on various types of elimination diets. So diets...
Oh, I do. I'm diagnosed with POTS. I got it post-COVID, so it's. I mean, it may be long COVID, but I've always had POTS. Always. It's just it got exacerbated after I had COVID. So I'm saying okay. And some doctors call. I've heard a few doctors call POTS and long COVID the same thing, because maybe clinically they present the same. Maybe it's something that affects... Okay, what if there were certain viruses or whatever that affected the body in certain ways that affected the body identically, even though there were slightly different things? But anyway, it was exacerbated. I don't know. But how many times have you seen me do salt here? Now, I don't do it all day long, but while I'm sitting here, sometimes I think about it and I'll do it. But that's why that's sitting there. But that is the best quick cure for if someone's having an episode with POTS. And I've never done it, but I guarantee you, I was a corpsman. I've given so many saline infusions you wouldn't believe, and they help people that don't got POTS. And I know I've heard about people having POTS so severe that they had to get like saline solutions every day. Those were females, by the way, not one male. But do you have POTS? I mean, and do you know that you consume too much POTS from the salt from testing? Because you can get testing to see what your levels are, I believe. I kind of go by how my body feels. I know that's a horrible thing to do, but I think with me it kind of works. If I need a little bit of a pep, orange juice and maybe a little bit of salt and, that kind of thing. Yeah, I have tachycardia from the pots. Well, I have not tachycardia. I have palpitations where my heart goes buh, 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 buh. But when my heart does go buh, 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 my heart is beating properly. It's just the rhythm isn't quite correct. I'd be interested into looking at electrolytes in general. The best thing you can do are power drinks. Not power drinks. Not like your Gatorade, Powerade, that kind of thing. Those are like designed for ADHD people, and then take your vitamins with them or whatever, that kind of thing. But yeah, you can't do much better.
The diet,
like gluten or dairy, which are the most common, right?
Yes, and then see how that might affect a child's behavior and their learning. What I found in clinical practice is that because many autistic children tend towards a more restricted diet anyway, because of sensory sensitivities, or what this reduced flexibility,
picky eaters, basically.
Yes. And so the diet often is very, very limited already to begin with, and also often limited to highly processed foods. So if you remove
mac and cheese diet,
that's right, or a goldfish, or potato chips, French fries, a standard American diet, unfortunately. But if you remove something from a diet that's already very restricted, you risk some serious.
All right, I've got to take a quick break right now, and I will be right back. All right. I have made it back. Let's see what they're saying here.
Mm-hmm. So we find it's almost always a better approach to work on first expanding the diet, so expanding whole foods, nutrient-dense foods.
What you add, right?
Yes. And so we have a nutrition and feeding program that's a collaboration between our medical providers and our feeding therapists, our speech therapists, our occupational therapists who help a child. So it's both what you eat, the nutrition side, and how to eat, the feeding side. And then once you've increased a child's diet to a degree where you then feel comfortable eliminating things, and there are a lot of elimination diets worth exploring.
Like?
So we do know that, for example, celiac disease, gluten allergy, is more common. It's actually considered a co-occurring condition.
Yeah, isn't it like
autism.
6 or 17% of kids with autism have elevated gluten antibodies?
I don't know the exact percent, but it definitely
like 20%
is more,
of schizophrenics. And
it's more common.
I've never heard that.
And the signs may be a little bit harder to detect also in a child who has behavioral differences already, who may have a harder time communicating.
We call these co-occurring or comorbidities, but that's really a false term. These are things that are all interrelated.
They are very interrelated, It's been a huge step just to get to the stage of thinking of co-occurring conditions. But you're right. Why do they co-occur? Because they all have common underpinnings.
Yeah, and the gluten triggers leaky gut, which creates inflammation in the body, then inflammation in the brain. So we know that gluten can be really a problem for a lot of brain issues. So sometimes that's a big factor. And you can measure antibodies in these kids, and often they're high. And you're just like, wow, I didn't know that. And you see a big change when you get rid of it. I've seen this in my patients. What about dairy?
Yeah, so what's very interesting about dairy is that there's some research suggesting that it can interfere with folate metabolism.
That's right.
So
that's interesting.
So there are some tests available to look at folate receptor antibodies, for example.
Yes.
And
been doing those for years in my patients.
Produce on a dairy-free diet. So all of that's very important information to get for a child.
Yeah. So what you just said in English for everybody was basically what happens when you eat dairy. There are antibodies that form. Your immune system produces antibodies that attack the receptors for a vitamin called folate or folic acid. And this is a critical nutrient in regulating mitochondrial function, detoxification, neurotransmitter function, inflammation, glutathione production. It's so critical. It's called methylation. And when that doesn't work, and these kids almost all have these methylation issues, they get pretty significant dysfunction. So, what you're saying is it's not one thing. There's like no one thing to do, but there's many things to do that is personalized based on what you find in each kid.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so it means looking at a lot of things. We do pretty intensive, for example, genetic testing, because those genetic markers are very helpful information.
And just be clear, the genetic markers aren't like, I have the gene for autism. It's this, maybe you have these methylation genes that are off, or glutathione genes, or other genes that relate to oxidative stress, or other things that you're looking at, right?
Yeah, relate to mitochondrial dysfunction, genes that relate to ion channels in the brain and different. So, yes, there are a whole host of different genes that can be really informative.
And you can modify treatment based on those genes, right?
That's right.
They're not fixed. You can actually improve their function by giving them nutrients or changing different things in their diet or lifestyle or environment or maybe medications, right?
That's also a huge misconception. Sometimes parents will say to me, well, why should we test genes? We can't change them. Well, we can change the effects the genes have. We can influence gene expression. Yeah. And there are, as you know, lots of technologies now that actually do change genes in various ways. And so it's that the future of gene modification, gene therapy is on the horizon. And
so, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So you combine these sort of genetic testing with other things that look at nutritional factors and dietary testing. So you mentioned we could spend the whole time on diet, because I think that plays a role. I actually had a kid, I remember, who many kids respond to gluten, dairy-free diets, and you're right, you have to add in real food. You have to kind of get them. That's a really important point. But one kid was really violent. He was like an 8-year-old autistic kid, and was just really aggressive, really violent. The parents didn't know what to do. I said, well, why don't we try a ketogenic diet? And they did. He ate it and completely changed him. Completely changed him. He became more normal, no violence, got more speech. All the autistic features kind of regressed. I wouldn't say he was perfectly normal, but he went from like a non-functioning, verbal kid to a more kind of normal kid. And so, you know, that taught me a lot. It's like, wow, you know, these kids, something in these kids' diets can be playing a role.
Yes. Well, diet, I mean, it just has such a profound influence on the body's metabolism, its biochemistry, and therefore behavior and learning. And so it's hugely important. But it's also an area that can be hard to change.
It's very hard,
for children.
And particularly as kids, because they're so picky.
Yeah.
You mentioned the next step, which was supplements.
Yeah. So dietary supplementation can be very impactful as well.
Yeah.
So there's so much to potentially say about this area too. But I think as it relates to, you know, my area of specialization around mitochondrial function, there are a lot of blood tests that we can do to look at, to give us insight into a person's mitochondria.
I have not heard about this at all.
Like carnitine or...
Like carnitine levels, coenzyme Q10, liver function, lactic acid, acylcarnitine profile.
But this 20, basically with this gluten, is that basically a lactose intolerance 20% thing that they were talking about? Because what I think is interesting is this. I'm Scandinavian, so for Scandinavians are supposed to have issues with that. But they say it's lactose, however... with goat's milk, because of the way the fat molecules are, I can drink goat's milk all day long. I can drink 2 gallons of goat's milk a day easy, and be fine. Now I cannot do that with cow's milk because of the fat molecules or whatever. But I don't know if it's the lactose or the fat. And I think a lot of people and doctors conflate the two, although it may be 2 different conditions. Not being able to digest the larger fat molecules versus actual lactose. I think they, like I said, I think they may be 2 different things that are conflated, but maybe they are related. I don't know.
Urine organic acids, amino acids.
I also kind of have a theory that Scandinavians might have autism more than, and like English of that kind of stock, I guess, or heritage. I think that we might tend to have be autistic more often. And it may be because we're islanders and we were stuck on the same island, you know, and it's inbreeding. I mean, the Brits are literally inbred. Quite a bit compared to Europeans on the mainland there.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of markers.
Not what you're going to get at your typical checkup with your regular doctor. So if you go to your regular neurologist, they're not going to know what you're talking about. But there are neurologists. And I've drank local cow milk, but and the goat's milk. I had a goat dairy. Now when I sold milk, I pasteurized it, but I drank it raw. But I also rotated out. I had brand new milk every day, of course, you know. And doctors like you were
several times a day sometimes.
Around the country in your centers do all this, which is really revolutionary.
And fortunately, more and more, you know, I think because the research has really
caught up.
Yes. So there's more awareness now, but it's still, you're right, it's still a work in progress.
So you're actually testing their mitochondria.
If I ever get another place and I can get out in the country, I'm going to have at least 2 nannies, probably. Because I love I love goats, and they would be my pets, but they'd also be my milk nannies.
And you'll function through tests that are available.
Yes.
And then you're customizing the treatment based on what you find.
That's exactly right. So, for example, if there are levels that are low, so you know, there's so much, you know, mitochondria are complex. You gave a really nice description earlier. So they, you know, one of their major functions is to fuel the body. They're sort of an energy currency or powerhouse. But there are things like low carnitine levels, or even supplementation with carnitine, supplementation with creatine.
It's like what bodybuilders use.
Yes.
But it's a mitochondrial cofactor.
Mm-hmm. B vitamins can be really helpful, antioxidant vitamins. So there are dozens of different dietary supplements that we might think about for a particular child that could help a lot with their learning and their development.
I know, and when I first learned about your work, I read some of your papers that looked at brain imaging and the metabolic function of the brain, meaning the mitochondrial function of the brain. And you're some of the first to show, in addition to neuroinflammation, there was mitochondrial dysfunction.
Yes.
And that led you to kind of go, well, maybe if we tried to correct some of these mitochondrial pathways, which we learn about, you know, with these inherited metabolic mitochondrial diseases that are really rare, actually.
This is Lumen, the first device for hacking your metabolism. With just one breath.
Because I'm too poor to pay YouTube not to pay give me commercials.
It worked.
Yes.
So tell us a story about what you've done in a patient that used this approach for diet mitochondrial therapy.
Yes.
And what did you find?
Well, there are some. So mitochondrial dysfunction is actually very common in many different neurological conditions. Very common in autism. There are now research studies showing that in blood, in muscle, in brain. So some of the research that we did using brain imaging showed patterns of which parts of the brain even are affected by mitochondrial dysfunction in autism. And then there's also...
I just sent this to Kimberly, the MFTR pathway gal on TikTok that everybody's either with or kind of attacking right now.
A lot of research showing the value of certain supplements.
The BH4 pathway gal?
Like the ones I mentioned and many others. And so as part of...
You mean supplements just don't cause expensive urine like most doctors say?
No, they can, when they're matched, when you have the right supplement for the right person.
Exactly, right.
They can just...
Personalized nutrition.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think personalized nutrition, and if there's a way that we could tell the balance is right now, my doctor is giving me a special B vitamin because I'm not out in the sun and I'm not getting my B. So I'm trying to just go out in the sun, but the cold air hurts my skin so much, and sun hurts my skin, and that's why I always wear long sleeves, because just a slight breeze affects me. So I don't know. But I think personalized nutrition, if we could do that, particularly with our quantum computing and so forth that we're going to be doing here in the near future, well, I think we might be able to test for that. Heck, we might have monitors on us at some point in time to have everything, our trace minerals and everything exact all the time. There's no telling what we're going to end up with. That's not going to be anytime soon, but
yeah.
So you use these compounds and
so as an example, children, there's a pattern of regression, developmental regression, that's quite common in autism, where a child loses developmental skills. Yeah. As you can imagine, it's really frightening, for parents to see. Very often that regression in autism happens between 18 months to 3 years of age. Mm-hmm. And it also is often associated with what we think of in medicine as a physiological stressor. So, an illness of some kind, or a surgical procedure, or even something like starting a new school or new daycare or the birth.
Neither one of my kids did that, and I did not do that.
Of a sibling, or moving to a new city. So
I'm going to jump into a really controversial topic, which I'm sure is coming.
I don't do controversial stuff. We're going to have to skip past this part.
That I've seen in my practice, and is almost heresy to say in medicine. But is there a role of vaccines in maybe being one of these triggers? And the reason I say that is I had a...
Okay, there is literally... Okay, he's talking about triggers, but I just want to throw out there is not one doctor that has ever actually thought that vaccines cause autism. Not one that's ever published or said it that I know of. Ever. Except for the one that was discredited and lost his medical license.
A kid who was 22 months old, perfectly normal kid. His mother worked for a major pharmaceutical company, and he had a vaccine at 15 months and started to regress and lost all of his developmental milestones, became nonverbal and fully autistic. And so I don't know if that was the cause, but it was a moment.
He became fully autistic
so many times from so many patients.
What?
That there's got to be some
new school or new daycare or the birth of a sibling or moving to a new city. So
is that what he really said?
A controversial topic, which I'm sure is coming. That I've seen in my practice, and is almost heresy to say in medicine. But is there a role of vaccines in maybe being one of these triggers? And the reason I say that is I had a kid who was 22 months old, perfectly normal kid. His mother worked for a major pharmaceutical company, and he had a vaccine at 15 months and started to regress and lost all of his developmental milestones, became nonverbal and fully autistic. And
he did not become autistic. He already was autistic.
You know, and so I don't know if that was the cause, but it was a moment.
I cannot believe it's 2024 and 8 days ago this doctor said that.
Where things changed. And I've heard the story so many times from so many patients that there's got to be something there. And I'm
no, that's a fallacy. That is a complete fallacy. Just because there is one version of the Bible that has been made 1,000,000 times does not mean that it's perfect and that it doesn't have a mistake in it. There could be another Bible that doesn't have a mistake in it that's only been reproduced a couple of thousand times.
Vaccines cause autism, but they may affect a kid who's vulnerable. Because this kid, typically you see they're born by C-section. They don't breastfeed. They've had lots of ear infections. They've had lots of antibiotics. Their microbiome's messed up. And so they're kind of sitting ducks. And maybe they have all these polygenic risks for getting into trouble when they have an insult. Right. So could this play a role? What's your take on
that? Lobotomize him.
And you're right. Vaccines is a topic that unfortunately is so polarizing in autism.
Like pro-life or pro-choice.
Hello, Neil.
It's not religion. Let's talk about the science.
Yeah. So it is an area where I certainly wish there could be much more open discussion and less controversy, less heated debates. But I will say, when it comes from the point of view of mitochondria, it actually, a stressor is a stressor, and like...
I tell you what, Neil, I'm really, really impressed with this. I am really, really surprised. I'm impressed with Danielle's knowledge, too, and heroic, too. I'm really, really... it's great to be surrounded by people with so much knowledge and understanding, but this video is really surprising and impressing me. And this gal is a BCBA, which surprising me, but she's also a doctor, a PhD doctor, and a neurologist. And so far, she has not said any quackery. No, she is a BCBA, and I have heard zero quackery from this gal.
That I just mentioned, whether it's a psychosocial stressor,
I don't know how,
or whether it's an illness. In many ways, the mitochondria respond in the same way.
Yeah.
So, and I think as physicians, we all have very when a patient comes to us and the parents have observed something, we really, I think. It's important to believe. It's important to believe the parents and what they've seen and understand their experience, and then to really.
That's a radical idea as a doctor. We know how it's supposed to go, so that doesn't fit my theory. So it's not relevant. Yeah. But actually, it may be very relevant.
I think now doctors are partners. Doctors shouldn't be viewed as authorities or those who.
Thank you.
Answers.
Amen.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
So
that's amazing that she said that.
When children, especially when children go through a period of developmental plateau or regression, it is a red flag. It is an emergency. And so I think of, there's a term in neurology, time is brain.
Time is brain.
Time is brain. And it first developed around stroke to get people to act more urgently around stroke. But I think time is brain really applies also to autism.
Yeah.
And why is it that a child might be diagnosed with sometimes a child will have the first signs of autism at a year or 18 months, not get a diagnosis until they're 3 or 4, not get any medical testing until they're 6, 7, or 8, or 15, or 21. I've certainly
are freaking 50.
Seen I know you've
51.
That too. And so we have to be much more quick to identify when the brain is struggling, when it's not getting the energy it needs, when it's under excessive stress, and then be much more quick to act. And action means doing the appropriate tests and then taking steps in lifestyle changes, dietary supplementation, or some kind of very interesting newer approaches like neuromodulation. So there are different ways of using electrical and magnetic stimulation to improve brain function.
Okay, magnetic stimulation is not shock. They're not shocking the brain or anything like that.
There are certainly medications, but not just,
hyperbaric oxygen I've seen used.
Yeah, there are a variety of some of these novel interventions that are really exciting. So
I don't have a problem whatsoever with any of these interventions being tried or whatever, because the symptomology of autism, like the flight response and so forth, if you could help me with that flight response, I might be able to function somewhat normally, psychologically.
So in the area of neuromodulation, one that we use is a form of tiny microcurrent electrical stimulation that stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the major nerve of the body of the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah. And we know that it helps to then counter the body's chronic stress response and sympathetic overstimulation, which is so common, in many conditions, and including autism. So that's yet another really exciting category. And then the final one of the 6 is what I call developmental behavioral approaches. This is a huge category.
This is where she's going to go downhill, because she is a BCBA.
Category, including things like occupational therapy, speech therapy, dance movement therapy, art therapy. It's all these ways that we can teach children.
She did not say ABA.
And create those learning opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, all this is just so important. And your book, Magnificent Minds, which is just come out, it's really an incredible content.
I think, and I might even start tonight. I've been wanting to take the testing or take a course to become a, ABA therapist thing. And the reason I want to take that, I don't believe in ABA therapy at all, but I want to take that to have a better understanding. And when people tell me how wonderful ABA is, I would like to say I'm an ABA therapist, because you can take the course online. It's 40 hours, and then you send in $50 and you become a therapist. So in other words, a 17-year-old could go take a 40-hour class for $50, and then they can be a qualified expert in autism for the rest of their life. ABA therapy is called applied behavioral analysis, and it is the one therapy that is paid for in the United States by Medicare and the government. In most places in Europe, it's not allowed because it's considered torture. But it is in England, I think, Canada, and maybe Australia, I think. And there are some other places. What it is, no, it's not eugenics. What it is mind control. It's behavioral science. It's the same thing that was applied for gay conversion therapy, and then the shock therapies and so forth. In fact, the shock therapies are still being done. There's more shock than is allowed to be given to a cow or a dog. In other words, just to change behaviors, if they stim too much or whatever, if they flap, then they will administer a shock that would be illegal. You would go to jail for giving to a cow or a dog. And that is real. It's called the Judge Rottenberg Center in Massachusetts.
Contribution to the field from someone who's really in the weeds on this, and not just sort of a kind of fringe doctor, but someone who,
with electric shocks that you could not legally give to a dog or a cow. Instead of going about looking at the symptomology or the psychology or whatever else, it's just considered a behavioral problem that has to be changed by positive or negative reinforcement to extremes.
Who's trained in top institutions, who's doing really hardcore research, and has actually found the thing that I'm so happy to talk to, because for decades I've been out there doing this, seeing these patients.
Well, yeah, and so actually Stalin and who was the other one? They actually started right after World War II, because it first came out with was it Skinner, and when he was doing the study with the saliva from the dogs, and when he rang the bell, and he found out that whenever he rang the bell, then they would start salivating, and then he started basically behavioral science, which was applied to brainwashing and extracting information from prisoners, and that's why the Russians got very involved in it, because they wanted to do mind control on the humans, and that's where in the United States, and I don't know if it ever happened, but remember there was the rumors about the Russians sending radio waves and stuff like that. All that stuff is all mixed together. They have issue with specific personality traits in general population and attempt to delete them. Yep.
Kind of in the wilderness, seeing the smoke signals in the scientific literature that were pointing in this direction, actually paying attention.
No, it's actually true. It's actually true. That's literally what ABA is trying to eliminate behaviors that the general population is not used to seeing, like this. Like, stimming. If I go around Walmart and, I'm doing that, it's going to make people feel uncomfortable. And I do it anyway because screw them, flap harder, right? Screw them, flap harder. That's my thing,
Being found in these
but actually, I do mitigate a lot of my stemming and my autistic traits when I'm in public. I do.
They would come to me like, I don't know, I've really never treated autism before, but you want to try, let's work together and see what we find. And we started digging. We do toxin load testing. We're looking at heavy metals. We'll look at microbiome in the gut. We'll look at mitochondrial function, nutritional levels, genetics, and we'll start to look at inflammatory pathways and see all these things going on.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. You're supposed to like and subscribe and share and all that stuff. Darn it.
Like tailor it to meet the patient's particular unique set of findings. And these kids, would come back from oblivion. I mean, they literally would come back from being completely locked in. It's kind of locked. I mean, the extreme cases of autism are like they're locked in. And a lot of people walk around with Asperger's. But
okay, we're going to go. Okay, he's talking about smoke in the wilderness.
I don't know. I've really never treated autism before, but you want to try, let's work together and see what we find. And we started digging. We do toxin load testing. We're looking at heavy metals. We'll look at microbiome in the gut. We'll look at mitochondrial function, nutritional levels, genetics, and we'll start to look at inflammatory pathways and see all these things going on, and then start to just kind of like tailor it to meet the patient's particular unique set of findings. And these kids would come back from oblivion. I mean, they literally would come back from being completely locked in. It's kind of locked. I mean,
and I can buy that. I can buy that. I think that's real.
Walk around with Asperger's like Elon Musk. I mean, but there's like kids who are just locked in. They can't talk. They can't communicate. They have no social skills. They can't really function very well. And to see these kids come out of that is.
But the other thing that you have to understand is that a 2-year-old matures to a 3-year-old, matures to a 4-year-old, and if they're lucky, they get to 5, 6, 7, 8, and on up. And as all kids mature, they actually, mature. So a lot of times, autistic kids, like my son did, he kind of matured on his own without needing any medical intervention. What I did was natural environment training, but it was actual natural environment training. And that is life skills in life situations.
A miracle. No, we don't think there's, quote, survivors of autism, but there are. So can you talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, don't you dare say that. If we're autistic, we're always autistic. Maybe our symptomology or whatever may get better, and we may be more easily be able to cope with things at sometimes, but we're always autistic.
Diagnosed with autism. There's a certain percent, depending on what research study you look at, it varies, but probably somewhere around 10% who over time lose the diagnosis of autism, meaning they no longer meet those diagnostic criteria.
Just naturally?
Yes.
Without treatment?
No, with
treatment.
With treatment.
Yeah.
With treatment. They're still autistic, though. You can't be unautistic. With treatment, what they're doing, they're masking so much that you can't see it anymore. Now, if they were to stop at the autistic people got better and more functional, that's one thing. But to act like they are no longer autistic pisses me off.
interventions, medical as well as developmental behavioral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I had a case. It was this case I was
behavioral. See how she said behavioral? That's what she's talking about. They stopped stimming or whatever. They stopped flapping, so now they're cured. I can't believe after all that great stuff she said that she finally had to go down that rabbit hole. That she had to go there. She was doing so well. And he was doing fairly well.
I was telling you about from this little boy. It was 22 months when I saw him, and he started getting regressive.
No, actually, he wasn't doing very well. This is the thing. Here we have the qualified experts. The qualified experts here. And they're getting it completely wrong. They don't even understand autism. And they were doing so good in the nutritional and everything else. And then they drop the ball and think we're just going to get cured. Because they changed our behaviors.
Of autism at 15 months. And we looked at his gut. And these kids typically have really smelly, stinky, bad poops, constipation. And they have really bad dysbiosis. They have usually bacterial or yeast overgrowth, which affects them in many ways because the metabolites from the microbiome cause brain inflammation and leaky gut. He had organic acids. He had really significant mitochondrial dysfunction. He had gut inflammation with elevated calprotectin, which is a biomarker we use for colitis. But he didn't really have colitis. And we found all these methylation genes, glutathione genes that were abnormal. We found elevated levels of heavy metals like mercury and lead. And so we basically built a program to address the things that we found. I wasn't treating autism. I was basically helping his basic systems get back in balance.
Right.
And, within 10 months, this kid just dramatically changed. We redid all these biomarkers almost completely.
But the thing is these kids are autistic and may have chemical imbalances as far as minerals, vitamins, and all these other things. And when you fix that and you take care of and get them balanced and get them the proper protein, make sure they get the proper protein and the proper amount of fluids and all these things, of course they're going to do better. Everyone is. But that does not cure, if you have a perfect, I did 4-H. If you give an animal the perfect nutrition, a pig a perfect nutritional diet, it's still a pig. It's still a pig if it does not have a perfect nutritional diet and it's starving to death. But if you give that pig the proper nutrition so that it can thrive, then by definition, it's going to thrive. But it's not going to cure the pig of being a pig. It's still a pig. I'm calling autistic people pigs, evidently. Maybe that wasn't so good of an analogy to use. Somebody might get offense to that one.
Worse, most of them. The mercury was a little longer to get out of his system. And, the kid became completely normal. And, his father sent me this video of him when he was 10 years old, just playing baseball and being a normal kid.
Neil, I think you're right. I think talking about it helps me, And that's why I'm doing this, That's why I'm doing this. I've never seen anyone do this type of talk analysis of things. I've seen younger kids talk about the fads and so forth, and about should you use this word? Should you use that word? Autism moms, boyfriends, girlfriends, but nothing about like this. And actually talking about the autism itself, talking about the politics, talking about the doctors, and that kind of thing. I'm the only person that I know of that is doing it in a almost like 80s, 90s talk show, AM radio kind of way.
Wasn't verbal, wasn't talking, was just sitting on the floor, stimming himself. And I'm like, if it's possible once, if it's possible just one time, shouldn't the entire scientific community, the NIH, and the scientists be going, what is going on here? How do we take this insight? And actually, it's true in one patient, could it be true in another, and another, and another. And so that's kind of the work you've done, is really try to sort of make what has been really on the margins of medicine central to how we think about autism. And it's really revolutionary.
Okay, I'm sorry. All I can hear her is in the background is going, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's kind of soothing, but then again, it's sounding a little bit weird.
Or stimming himself. And I'm like, if it's possible once, like if it's possible just one time, shouldn't the entire scientific community, the NIH, and all scientists be going, what is going on here? How do we take this insight and actually, it's true in one patient, could it be true in another and another and another? And so that's kind of the work you've done, is really try to sort of make what has been really on the margins of medicine central to how we think about autism. And it's really revolutionary.
Well, you know, so many of the basic...
He said a lot of words there.
...principles that in medicine are foundational, it's really applying them to autism.
Yeah.
And seeing the power that has. So
yeah. Like one example that I read about, which I thought was crazy, and it sounds crazy, but is fecal transplants. You know?
You're right. You're absolutely right, Hirok.
Do you know anything about fecal transplants, where they take the poop out of a healthy kid and put it in a kid with autism and what it does?
Well, I know about the research studies that have been done.
Oh, no.
In my own practice, patients of mine who have had it done, who have gone...
Have you heard of the playing with poo? Taking poo out of a kid? Yes. It's a thing. They were taking poo out of kids and putting them in autistic kids. Putting other people's poo in their digestive system. Yeah.
Who have participated in a research study, and so I've been able to see the changes.
And what do you see?
Yeah. Well, it varies, but in some children, no change. But in other
and some of those kids are just full of shit. I'll tell you that.
Children, their stool quality improves dramatically. Language, communication, social skills, learning, behavior. So the attention.
Yeah, you know what? The problem with you autistic kids, you're too damn honest. You just need to be full of shit like everybody else. So let's shove some up in there.
Yeah.
So in some children where that's an important factor, it really can change things, because we know the microbiome has a profound influence on the brain. And so it can, it can really lead to some...
And actually, I think there is some legitimacy to it. And it, like you said, with the microbiome, stuff is absorbed or whatever through the intestinal tract. And so that's what they're doing. So the poo isn't probably completely digested or whatever, and then they put it in there. And I don't even know how the hell they would get it in there. Maybe they liquefied it or something. Extended enema? I don't know. Weird.
Dramatic improvements.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I think, like I said at the beginning, 95% of these kids have some type of gut dysfunction.
You're right. You're right.
Typical neurology.
And that's right. 95% of autistics, if not all autistics, have some kind of gut problem.
Just will not even pay attention. Well, that's their gut or whatever. It's not the brain.
And that's why we need to have probiotics every day. And kombucha. Danielle's not here to pick on now, I don't think.
But it's one system.
Yeah.
Right? And so your work has really helped us to understand that whole child approach. And that's what you write about in Magnificent Minds, which definitely everybody should get a copy. And if you know anybody with autism or have a friend or a kid or in any way are connected to anyone, this is going to be a profound frame shift in how to think about the disease and how to think about treatment.
See, and he's saying with autism, and he's calling it a disease when it's not. It's a developmental disorder. That is literally wrong to call it a disease. It should never be called a disease. It's a developmental disorder. I don't even like calling it. I would prefer to call it a developmental difference. But that's not even good. A variant, a developmental variant. That's all we are. Yeah. Well, we are products of our environment. We're stardust.
This woman I was telling you about who brought her kid in was basically told, well, your kid's got autism, do behavioral therapy. He's going to be institutionalized. We're sorry. Good luck. And that's the message a lot of parents get. And it's really disheartening. And these, I think...
That is.
How do you see this approach sort of getting more traction in medicine? I mean, you're doing the research, you're pushing this out there, you've created these clinics all around the country with Cortica, but are you seeing your colleagues start to look up and pay attention and start to incorporate some of these things?
Yes. I mean, what's really been a very positive change in our field is that there is a lot more understanding of the medical basis of autism. And
I have no idea, heroic.
Exciting, I think, direction for the field is that even those, I myself am a behavior analyst, I'm a BCBA, and the field of ABA therapists, even within that discipline, there's a lot more recognition of the medical basis and the medical contributors to autism. And so a lot more collaboration and partnerships are happening between behavior specialists and medical specialists. And I think it's our job to teach, to spread the word, to make more known about what the research really does show now. And so the way that we at Cortica are trying to do this is to first grow our team, to set up more clinics, to serve more and more families, and to publish research. So we have a part of Cortica is our Cortica.
All right. So in all fairness, I think I'm going to start rating videos in trains. And so far, this is about a 7 out of 10 trains. It just doesn't have a caboose because they've been getting some things wrong here.
Innovation Network, and we conduct clinical trials.
Amazing.
So we've done over a dozen clinical trials already. Some looking at interventions for the gut. Others looking at virtual reality. So we're looking at a virtual reality platform to enhance behavior therapy. But it's really about contributing to the research, and then also making this quality, the standard of clinical care available to as many families as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the clinical research I'd love to explore with you a little bit because, one of the challenges, and I encountered this when I was at Cleveland Clinic, we wanted to study dementia, which, I think autism and Alzheimer's are almost two sides of the same coin. We see a lot of the same biological things going wrong. Gut issues, mitochondrial issues, neuroinflammation, methylation issues, detox issues, toxic load. I mean, it's just, I'm a family doctor, and I basically treat everybody from birth to death. And so I see the whole spectrum. Yeah. And I was seeing these patterns of these similar.
Hey, fellow lobsters, if you've ever read 12 Rules for Life, have you ever wondered how to talk to your kids about
phenomena in many different brain disorders? So anyway, I was at Cleveland Clinic, and we were trying to do a research project on Alzheimer's and dementia. We were working with the leading neurologist there who was in charge.
I know, they do need to wrap it up.
He got this. He understood all this. But we went to the head of research, and she said,
I'm gonna figure out a way to do an animation for trains.
Well, look, you can't do everything at once. You have to study one thing at a time. You want to study diet. You want to study this vitamin. You want to study this approach. You want to, and I'm like, well, actually, that's not really how the body works. So if you want to treat a problem, you have to deal with all the factors that are causing it. You can't just do one thing.
We know that.
So how do you kind of address your clinical trials? Because you want to optimize their diet. You want to optimize their nutritional stuff.
I cannot unhear that now.
You want to fix their mitochondria. You want to fix their gut. You want to reduce inflammation. You want to detox their bodies.
Although she's got a really nice voice. It's really, I mean, it sounds good, actually.
Toxic load. You want to do the behavioral therapies. All of it's needed.
Right.
You can't just do one thing.
Yeah.
So how are you approaching clinical research using this? Because you won't see the results. Like you just do one thing, you might not see a thing.
It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge. And it's one of the reasons I think that a lot of very promising therapies in autism have not made it past those early clinical trials.
Yeah.
Because we're not sure, maybe we're isolating that therapy. And in fact, we need a set of therapies together, or we're not selecting the right children. There's, phenotypic.
I'm getting bored.
Maybe some subgroups will respond and others won't.
Right.
Hey, fiddlehead.
So we don't, right? We're a bit stuck.
Yeah, like
in
I
that
said,
way.
if you don't have a vitamin D deficiency, vitamin D doesn't
Burn.
do anything, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have the thing. If your mitochondria are great, well, you give all these mitochondrial therapies, it's not going to see a change.
Right. So we're doing two things. One is, yes, we're studying novel, innovative therapies for autism in our research program and clinical trials, and doing our best to select appropriate subgroups and recognize that by isolating.
Okay, we're just gonna.
Is the more intensive initial therapy we can do, you'll see a massive change, right? So if someone's drinking 12 Cokes a day,
oh
and
no,
6 Cokes a day.
But is it like forever, or are you protesting it now? This is Fern's here, and Fern's been doing a protest against Autism Speaks all month. Oh, great, wonderful. Let me catch you in Discord in a bit. I'm going to wrap this up here pretty soon, if you don't mind. And let me talk to you there.
Not probably going to help them that much, right? So and so I tend to do an approach that really eliminates a lot of the bad food, adds in all the good food, optimizes all these basic systems. Yeah. And
see, the thing is I'm surprised that a lot of that my channel hasn't been taken down for hate speech, because all they have to do is say hate speech, and they say that they're English speakers, but they're not. They're Chinese people with translation programs that don't understand the context of what's being said. And so when they look at it, if they say, like, if you say, are you autistic or something like that, they're going to take that as an insult, no matter what the context is, because they don't understand it. But like I said, they say that they have English speakers or whatever, but you can tell from the way that they judge the things that they have no idea what's being said.
See what happens and see what's left over, and then you can start to add things.
And I'm sure you've seen that.
Kind of adjust, but that seems like what you found as well.
Yeah, and I will say, one thing to keep an eye on too with families when autism is.
Hey, you know what you can do in the meantime? You can still make videos. I don't know if you have a computer, but you can make videos, whatever, and start working on May Autistic Awareness Month.
Is part of their experience is there are
so are you taken down from lives, or is your whole channel taken down?
Potential places to start.
Well, I guess you're here, so your whole channel isn't taken out. It's just the lives.
Some families who can and want to do it all at once and will do well with that approach, and then others for whom they're already in a state of stress, maybe things at home are fragile, maybe resources are constrained, and so for me it's very important to meet them where they're at and say where do they feel comfortable and confident starting, and we can start there. And these other pieces are important, and we'll get to them. So it very much is about tailoring, not just to the child, but to the family.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I had autism in my own family.
I had it in my own family. I had autism in my own family, but then we got the right kind of shampoo, and it got rid of them autisms.
The gut.
There was that crabs. I don't know, something like that.
All of those set up the brain substrate in a way. And then
the vulnerable brain.
Yes. And then what is the environment presenting the brain with?
So Fiddlehead, I've decided I'm going to rate these by trains, and this is only getting, I think, 7 trains, which is pretty high rating, but they did good until about halfway.
Unfortunately, toxins in our environment, various other types of stressors and infections. Well, there are. Well, we know, for example, lead, certain heavy metals. We also know that there was a very influential research study out of Harvard School of Public Health about 10 years ago showing that there were over a dozen different industrial chemicals, so pesticides, things that are widespread in our environment, that are now even detectable in cord blood.
Yeah.
So they're in our bodies.
I think this was the Environmental Working Group did a study, like 10 newborn studies. It was 287 known toxins, and I think 210 or something were neurotoxic.
And that these are all being used without first being tested on, for their developmental toxic effects. So, and a lot of these, we know that they have an effect on mitochondria. Like that is, pesticides, for example.
Hey, Bubba, I think Fern jumped back out. All I know is it was taken down for hate speech. I don't know, but I mean, she's still here, so it's taken down for lives. But I'm going to talk to Fern after a while, hopefully.
Exactly.
So
I'm about to wrap up here.
There's a complex interplay of all those factors.
Yeah, it is. It's true. And you never know what it's going to be. I remember a kid I had with autism. and it turned out we did a stool test, and he had Giardia. And I gave him a drug that we used to treat Giardia called Flagyl, and it's like a parasite. And
I remember
kid
that.
woke up. I was like, wow, that was easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's something simple like that, or it could be a kid who's really sensitive to gluten. And sometimes it's just one big thing.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to try to get Fiddlehead to keep on making videos for Autistic Awareness Month next month.
It's a load of the total load concept, which is really important that we don't really think much about in medicine. We're looking for that silver bullet, that one explanation, that one pathway.
All right, I'm getting bored with these guys. I am going to interesting. I am definitely going to wrap it up here. I am going to be probably going live in an hour or two or whatever, and I'm going to be once again inviting folks to come to my channel and defend or tell me what's great about Autism Speaks, and tell me how Autism Speaks has helped them in their lives, because I've tried to get Autism Speaks to speak to me, and Autism Speaks won't speak to an autistic person, evidently, because they don't want to speak to me live. And so now I am inviting anyone who has had a good experience, who has had a personal experience with Autism Speaks, helping them directly. And hopefully I can get some kind of proof, receipt, pictures, something. I do believe the autistic people, but I want to see evidence that Autism Speaks is actually doing anything. Because I have not seen any direct evidence of that $400,000 going directly to help autistic people, and that's something I'd like to see. So I will be doing a continuation of my 100 hours, but now I'm at 5 hours of waiting for someone to have the gumption to defend Autism Speaks, and so far it has not happened. So I'm going to keep track and see how many live hours it takes for me to finally get someone who will defend Autism Speaks. This is David Page. Screw them. Flap harder. I love you guys. Bubbles, Fiddlehead, everybody, Neil. I've got to get